All right, commissioners, we're live.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chair Kite, and I would like to welcome you to the January 13th, 2021 Historic Resources Commission meeting. The HRC is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by North Carolina General Statutes, the City of Asheville's Unified Development Ordinance, and Buncombe County Ordinance. We are authorized to hear requests for certificates of appropriateness for alterations, demolitions, new construction, and other work within historic districts, or for the alteration and demolition of historic landmarks and other duties, including preliminary review of subdivisions as specified in the ordinances for the HRC. All commissioners and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through commission meetings a bit differently than normal. We are streaming live on the city's Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city's website, as well as through the link on the HRC webpage. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by dialing 855-925-2801 and entering code 9384. Welcome to all of you that are joining us today. I will now ask commission members who are participating to introduce themselves. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you're not speaking, and when you have a question or would like to speak, unmute your microphone. Please remember to mute yourself when you are done speaking. Commission members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Vice Chair Eakins.
Hi.
Commissioner Brusades.
Hi.
Commissioner Coleman. Commissioner Gardner.
Hi, everyone.
Commissioner Hornaday.
Hello.
Commissioner Lazarus.
Hi.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Good afternoon.
Commissioner West.
Hello.
And Commissioner Vaughn.
Happy New Year.
I'd also like to welcome today with us Councilwoman Gwen Whistler. She's the liaison to HRC and is sitting in on our meeting today. So welcome, Gwen. We appreciate having you on the meeting with us at the meeting today.
Thank you. I look forward to being your liaison.
Us too.
To help our audience follow along, I will state each section of the agenda aloud and will ask for a vocal roll call vote for each vote. The first item on our agenda is to consider the minutes from our December meeting of the HRC and to adopt those minutes. The minutes include findings of fact and conclusions of law for certificates of appropriateness. Are there any corrections?
I move we adopt the December 9, 2020 minutes and findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Thank you, Vice Chair Eakins.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Lazarus. And we will vote by roll call. Vice Chair Eakins.
Aye.
Commissioner Brusades.
Aye.
Commissioner Gardner.
Aye.
Commissioner Hornaday.
Aye.
Commissioner Lazarus.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Aye.
Myself, aye as well. And that motion carries, and we have adopted the minutes from the December 9th meeting. We will now begin the evidentiary hearings for the items listed on the agenda. As a quasi-judicial proceeding, the HRC is not setting policy, nor are we soliciting public opinion on the desirability of an application. The HRC hears and considers evidence presented and applies the standards set forth in the guidelines and standards of the specific historic district for that application. The HRC must make its decision upon competent, material, and substantial evidence to determine the facts of the hearing. The HRC will use judgment and discretion to apply the standards contained in the relevant guidelines to the facts. The commissioners in voting on an item will not have a fixed opinion, not susceptible to change, will not have a conflict of interest, will not have engaged in ex parte communication regarding the application. The following are rules for speaking. This meeting is open to the public, but participation is limited to interested parties who wish to provide comment and testimony regarding the proposal. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and how they relate to the relevant historic district standards and guidelines, not personal preference or opinion. Witnesses must swear or affirm their testimony. At this time, I will administer the oath for all the individuals who intend to provide witness testimony. We're going to start with 122 West Chestnut Street, recognizing that other applications, the applicants may not have joined the meeting yet, and we will follow up at that time with those applicants as well for their swearing in. So it's my understanding Alex and Shannon, along with Kenny Stillwell, 122 West Chestnut.
Sorry, give me just half a minute, Chair Kite. I'm sorry, I'm in a place where I can't. Okay, sorry about that. Did you go already, or do you need me to list who's here to be sworn in at the first round?
Yeah, according to my notes, we've got Kenny Stillwell here for 122 West Chestnut Street.
Right, and Aaron Zallen is here also for 81 Cortland.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, I will read the oath, and you can raise your right hand. I will acknowledge each of you by name for you to affirm one at a time. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information you present during the hearing for a certificate of appropriateness before the Historic Resources Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Alex?
I do.
Shannon?
I do.
Mr. Stillwell?
I do.
Mr. Zallen?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will now move to our first public hearing item. Alex, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you for 122 West Chestnut Street, which is old business and follow up from a previous month.
Thank you, Chair Kite and members of the commission. My name is Alex Cole. I'm a urban planner with the Planning and Urban Design Department. This first item before you today is for a new accessory structure. This item first, as some of you probably recall, came before the commission in October last year and has since been continued to give the applicant some more time to work on the plan. So I have included the revised plans in your packet, and I'm just going to go through a short presentation and kind of give an overview of just a recap. I know we have some commissioners that have since been appointed in between October and now. So this is the primary structure at 122 West Chestnut Street. It's about between 1,600 square feet. The property card says one thing, but the applicant has communicated to me that he's measured the entire house, and it measures out to be closer to 1,600 square feet. So I will let him speak to that. So as you might remember, there's an alley that runs along the side of the property, and the accessory structure is proposed on the rear of the lot. There was at one point in time an accessory structure back here that was a one-story accessory structure that has since been demolished or destroyed somehow. I'm not sure when that structure went away, but it is no longer standing. There's just like a little modest utility shed there now. So what they're proposing is a 1.5 story. It's about 900 and 968 square feet. So one thing I want to just clarify right off the bat is that there may be helpful if I go to the elevation drawings. There was some discussion the last time this was reviewed by the commission about how we look at square footage for accessory structures, because the guideline that pertains, or one of the guidelines that pertains to accessory structures notes that they can't be larger than 30% of the scale of the overall of the scale of the primary structure, which is actually intended to be somewhat vague to be helpful to property owners so that they have a little bit more wiggle room. It's not an exact calculation. However, we do look at the square footage ratios, and this structure is still quite large given the size of the primary structure. While the basement level or the first floor is intended to be unheated square footage, we are still looking at the overall form. So the north elevation that you see with the exposed basement level or first floor that would be facing Cumberland or Chestnut Street. So, it really is, from a form perspective, more or less similar to what we saw before. The porch has been modified since to not wrap around the side of the structure based on some of the feedback from the commission last time. However, I do think that it's still a little bit problematic in that what the feedback was, since the porch on the primary structure, as you can see, is within the footprint of the building, that the suggestion was that it would be, the design would be more successful if the porch were within this footprint as well. But it's not, it's on the back or the south side, but it's just kind of stuck on. So that has been changed a little bit. I did also note in my staff report about the change to the topography in order to excavate for the to expose those garage doors or the little utility doors on the north side. I still have some concerns about the overall compatibility. The siding materials are broken up on the primary structure. As you can see on the first floor, it's lap siding on the first story. So I tend to think it would be probably help this design a lot if the structure were lap with, a division between the shake siding and the lap, like the primary structure. The windows are also not really compatible as far as the number of lights, and the sizes are all kind of different. So, and not that, like the primary structure, I can flip through the pictures of the elevations if we need to, but this, kind of has some places where the windows are ganged together, but then on the other elevations, they're kind of, like many Montford houses, the windows have kind of, mishmash placings, but I feel like at least the sashes could have some, either be just simple 1/1s or something that would be more compatible with the 12/1s that are, the main windows on the primary structure. So overall, there wasn't really a lot of change here. This is the rendering that shows both buildings together. And this one also shows you the building. This would be the structure as you would see, the accessory structure as you would see it behind. So you can see that it's still pretty tall in relation to the primary structure, which was, if in reading the minutes, it was definitely one of the biggest points of contention last time. As was the overall square footage. And then I did ask the applicant for some additional items that are listed in your staff report, one being the perspective rendering as you're looking from Chestnut Street. I did talk with the applicant earlier this week to kind of go over all of these points of feedback, and he simply didn't have enough time to get the perspective rendering that I was requesting, but this is an alternate drawing that was completed instead. So that's been added to your packet since earlier this week also. I tend to think that this rendering doesn't really help the application. In my mind, it kind of makes the structure feel very large and out of scale with the primary structure. But it's not really that much different than the last time you all saw the application. So those are my thoughts and comments. And if you have questions, I am happy to answer.
Alex, this floor plan reflects a change in the square footage, the footprint from the previous application, or not?
No, sorry, I didn't put the floor plans on the slide presentation. They're the same. So this is just showing the building footprint. And I can pull that up if it's helpful to look at the floor plan, but it's the same pretty much as the last.
With the exception of a change in the porch.
Right, correct.
I think the HVAC moved maybe to.
Yes, that was a change based on our feedback.
Alex, what about the driveways to minimize curb cuts, the sharing of driveway on the guidelines? Is that sort of looked at?
Well, so that really, in my opinion, comes in more to play when we're talking about the primary right of way. If you go down Cumberland Alley, there are tons of penetrations into the right of way itself, and many of the buildings are right up on the alley, and there's all kinds of little parking pull-offs and different things like that. So I'll defer to you all, of course, but in my opinion, it's not as big of a deal to have multiple pull-off areas or driveways off of an alley where it's like a secondary right of way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, last time you had the Sanborn map where you showed where the original location of the ADU was and the one-story ADU. Do you have that on this?
Yes, I thought I added it to the folder.
It might be number 9.
I don't think I added it to the presentation since we looked at it last time, but let me pull it up. It's not exactly in the same place, but it looks like the footprint and the Sanborn maps, it's not like they were 100% accurate, but
there is that footing in the backyard of the.
Yeah, you can see it on. Can you see that, or should I zoom in?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay.
And that's about where that footing is in the backyard.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Alex, that perspective photo that you had.
Sorry, you wanted to see that again? Is that
Yeah.
what you said? Okay.
Does it say the height of the rear building? I saw it in here.
So it's just from the ground level, so 27 feet, but that is not measuring from where you see the doors, where that would be dug out. It's not including that dimension. So I don't know. I'm just eyeballing that. It probably looks like, I don't know, 5 feet maybe, but I'll let Kenny, the applicant, speak to that.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioners, are there other questions for Alex at the moment? We can get some
I think that I
additional.
understood the square footage to be 68% or so of the main structure. Was that correct?
Yes, so that was based on the property card square footage calculation for the primary structure. And when I talked to the applicant earlier in the week, he let me know that he had measured the building and said it was closer to 1,600. So that would be bring it down a little bit, but still not, anywhere close if you were using the 30% as a calculation. based on square footage, it still wouldn't get it close. But
That was what I was alluding to make sure that the math was not even close with the revised square footage of the house.
yeah, I'll pull out my calculator and do the math for you.
Alex, you said it was 968 square feet, the accessory structure? So that would be 61% of the primary structure.
At the
Oh, give me
1,400 foot. At the 1,600 foot measurement.
At the 1,600 foot, yeah.
Thanks, Shannon. I was trying to find my desktop calculator with no luck.
30% of the 1,600, if the structure is 1,600 square foot, 30% of that would be 480 square feet.
Are there other questions for Alex? Okay. I'm going to ask Mr. Stillwell if there's any additional information that you would like for the commissioners to consider before we open the floor for public comment.
Yeah, I would, just a couple of questions. I guess based on, our understanding, I didn't realize that if we had a unconditioned area or basement, it'd be considered in the square footage. I guess I would like some feedback on the, the original structure that was there, as far as we could tell, was 17-ish by 21 or 20. It's hard to tell by the footing that was there. We're not too far outside of that number. I'd like to know what everybody feels is an appropriate size. And I guess what direction I'm pretty open to changes, window lighting and exterior finishes and things like that are easy for us to change. My understanding from when I read the historic documents for Montford was that this auxiliary structure should be more simple than the main structure. So I think that's kind of why Michael drew just the shake instead of doing a lap siding and a shake. I don't know if he wanted to keep a simpler exterior on that. As far as height, I think he did lower it on this drawing into the ground more. And I think Alex is right. Those doors are probably 5 feet out of the ground or lower into the ground than the rest of the structure. So I think, I don't remember on the original plans, he may have lowered it a foot or two, but he did change the interior dimensions. He kind of had a loft drawn in there and he took that out to get the roof line lower. We probably could get the roof lower, but we're trying to match with the gable roof line of the main structure. So it would be less of a pitch if we did that, but that wouldn't be a significant change for us to do. So I guess I was just looking for feedback. If we were to submit this, what kind of footprint do you feel that's more appropriate? And if we have a basement on the original structure, And so if we're not counting that, do we try to make the auxiliary structure basement more of a basement? Do we remove the porch and try to stick with the same size footprint, but put the staircase interior? So maybe have the main entry through the basement and then stairs into the, it's going to make it, the layout of the interior of the building tight, but it's probably feasible. So maybe just some feedback to help us. This is my first application in the historic district in North Carolina. So I just, from what I've read and with Michael's help, we're just trying to, I guess, get a set of plans that you guys feel is appropriate for the property.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant? I think we can, Mr. Stillwell, certainly provide you with the feedback that you're looking for. I do want to make sure the commissioners have answers to any questions that they may have. We need to also take a quick check for public comment here in a minute, and then we can follow up with some broader discussion and offer you the feedback I think that you're looking for around the questions and the concerns that staff has regarding the application. Commissioners, do you have questions? Okay, I'm going to pause for just a moment and open the floor for public comment, if there is any.
Shannon, does it look like we have anybody in the queue?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Apologize. No, we do not have anybody in the queue.
Thank you. Then I will close the floor for public comment and open up for general discussion. Commissioners, any thoughts or insight you might be able to offer to the applicant?
It seems to me that what Alex has said about the size is an extremely valid concern. I mean, I can't think of anything that gets this down into the wiggle room from 30% or so. Not the perspective drawing, not the square footage. I'm not quite sure of the point as to basement square footage, given the square footage in the primary structure and square footage in the proposed ancillary structure both include basements. It needs to come back smaller, and I think that the porch situation probably should, it should be within the footprint rather than just hung on the back. Well, those are my thoughts. None of them original.
Do you mind if I say that the square footage in the main structure, the basement square footage is not included even in the 1,400? So underneath the main house, that has a full basement underneath the entire structure except for that front porch.
I think that the reason why we're calculating it, Kenny, is because it's exposed. So it is like, as you're looking at it from Chestnut Street, that is part of the form. The basement level is, so that is why we're calculating it. In general, we would calculate it all together anyways, just to kind of make sure that the number of square feet we're approving is accurate. But I think if it were fully concealed within the grade, then we would be talking about a different thing, because it would be basically like a 1-story structure, whereas now it's exposed. And does
So,
that make sense?
yeah, definitely. And so if I did not do an exterior entry to the basement, would that change from there then? So would you consider that then? Then we'd be under the 480 square foot. We'd be under 30%. Is that a consideration? So if I take away that entry and put the entry inside the house to the basement, then would this footprint be acceptable?
I think from my perspective, that helps with a couple of items. One is the topography modifications to get the basement exposed. And I do think that it does help with the massing from West Chestnut. And I think that from my perspective, certainly the square footage exercise that we're discussing is part of that consideration for 30%. I do want to pay some attention to the Sanborn map that does show obviously a larger structure than the shed that's in the back right now, that I think is worth a comparison with that previous footprint to the footprint that you're proposing now, something that were to align itself more with what is what was in the Sanborn, that's documented in the Sanborn, seems like a valid exercise for the commission to consider. I think that largely speaks to the porch, because the footprint of the main part of the house is far closer to the dimensions of probably what that accessory structure was that's shown on the Sanborn maps. So for me, I think the basement entry is of concern for me, largely because it does make it feel taller, and it does change and modify the topography in a way that is not particularly consistent with the guidelines. So for me, I don't want to get overly hung up on square footage, because I think that's only really part of the 30% kind of, when we take that into partial consideration in terms of the evaluation of that.
Okay, so if I were to move that entry, so as far as like an exterior overhang over an entry door, I know they have an issue with the size of the porch, but is there some wiggle room in there for me to have a covered entry then on the back side of that property? Let's say basement in the ground, and I guess the side elevation you're seeing is you'll see just a single story and maybe some course of brick slightly out of the ground a little bit, and then I guess similar footprint. How would you like me to address the exterior entry at that point?
At the main entrance, the main house entrance.
The entrance to the let's say if we put the auxiliary building at ground level with a basement below, the entry into the main structure, how would I address that porch issue then? Would the porch be an issue at that point then, or I'm trying to figure out if we just can we keep the porch?
For me, I think the size of the porch is an issue, and I don't know that I'm completely ready to say get rid of the porch, because it's hard to visualize something smaller than that. I do think, the main house, the porch is understated and tucked back into that footprint. I think if it were had a roof line that was more inclusive of the porch and not this sort of tacked on porch and at that entrance, I think that could help the situation, and the massing. It certainly reads much bigger because the size of that porch, I think, is substantial in proportion to the size of the accessory structure.
Okay.
Do you think just a simple landing might suffice? I don't know if that's something that you want to consider, Kenny, but that might just be something that would be a little more straightforward.
As long as it's covered somewhat. I mean, I don't have to have a 15 by 15 porch by any means, but if we can work with the roof line, maybe more of a dormer style entry where it's smaller and it's just entry purposes, and we have something covered though to enter the home. If we're going to enter, if you're going to, I mean, it just seems like, every single historic house has some form of porch entry. So I don't think we want to get away from that. But if it's the roof line, maybe we change the roof line and less of a shed pitch, more. I don't know. I'm open for suggestions. I think it'd be really hard to include, a main house entry and then also, basement stairs into that area without having some form of covered porch.
How big a covered porch do you think that would end up being? I mean, you're really talking sort of a covered entryway, a covered slab, really, rather than a real porch, right?
I would imagine it would be elevated based on the the land elevation is going downhill. So on the backside of it, I think you still have to step up a step or two or three. I mean, how Michael has it on a drawing, it looks like it's 3 or 4. But if we set everything in the ground a little bit more and kind of change the roof line, I guess if we come back with an altered version and more of the roof line you're looking for, I don't want to eliminate that porch entry completely. If we go back to drawing this and making those changes, I want to make sure that, if I don't want a porch to be a deal breaker on this project.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to look at what you bring rather than, try to design this in my own mind in a matter of seconds. I think you've sort of got where we're headed. And, it sounds like, you're willing to meet it. I would, review again the standard and the Montford Historic District guidelines. I mean, the relevance of this ancillary structure is to the primary structure. And so it needs to be compatible, and to all of a sudden come out with a whole big porch isn't really compatible, regardless of what else is in the historic district. So I would just try to make that entrance area as compatible with the main house as the primary structure as possible.
Okay. All right. Does everybody else feel like that's agree with?
Now, I'd like to just clarify something. This is a Richard Sharp Smith building that's, and that's, I don't know if you're aware that's kind of a big deal in Asheville, and this exact footprint and design of house is, I think Benjamin can speak more to it, that there's probably 4 of them in Biltmore Village. This is the exact same, just with different siding. And so that's the big, what I'm having a problem with is this is and what Commissioner Eakin was saying is that this is the primary thing that should be seen from the street. And this large, 4 feet taller than this main building, that's peeking around and visible because there's a big sight line to see this. But where the footprint was before is tucked way further back. And it was a 1-story building that I'm sure was, I don't know what, I would just be guessing. But I think it needs to be in the location it was and be a secondary structure to this main structure and not compete with this structure. That's where I'm kind of having a hard time seeing that removing the doors and the porch that's in the back, but this building is in direct visual competition with a historic structure that is pretty important for that street.
Okay, I mean, yeah, I'm aware. You know, that's why I purchased the property. And, you know, I plan on doing, you know, an extensive historic renovation on the main structure because the condition it's in is pretty rough right now. But the auxiliary structure is actually 4 foot shorter than the other building, than the main structure. There's a few feet visible from the right-hand side from Chestnut. The lot is big enough to move the footprint of the building.
I think if you're moving it, it needs to be in my opinion, and not just my opinion, the guidelines that we are charged with following, unless there's a reason not to put it the same size in the same location, is how I'm reading that. I don't understand that. That's where it needs to be, and that's not going to be this building. It's going to be smaller, and it's going to be a different shape. Let me finish for just a second. And there is a large sightline to see in that area, and so I think that's how ground floor is.
Kenny, it sounded like you were going to say something there a minute ago.
It's not too far off from where the original structure was. Is he asking me to move it closer to the alleyway? I guess I'm confused. I didn't know what direction.
Alex, back up to slide 3, please. So that existing, I'm using my cursor, which you can't see. But Alex, could you show where that foundation is? Or
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. It's a little bit hard to, like, if you're, because I can't compare side to side. Unfortunately, I wish we were in the North Conference room and I could put these up together. But if you're looking at the Sanborn map, it looks like it's definitely shifted over so that it's fully behind the primary structure, which would probably help a lot. Kenny, I don't know if that's possible. You would probably have to reconfigure the parking a little bit, but
It doesn't look like. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
We wouldn't have to move it. The parking. It seems like that. If that's what he's saying is towards the alley, then shouldn't be too much of an issue. It's only a couple feet.
Yeah, it might help it a lot to, like, if you're, because I do agree with Will, and that was sort of why I pulled this slide up, is because it is really competing in a big way. If you're looking at how simplified the primary structure is, obviously this is kind of a funky view because you're looking up at the house, but if you're, standing in the middle of the street and you're looking straight at this house and you see now this, the accessory structure extending out beyond the side elevation, appears very large. And the other thing I think would help a lot too, this is why I suggested the lap siding, is because if it is sticking out like this, it almost looks even weirder with the shake siding as a competing building, if that makes sense. But I do think if you can move it further this way on the site, that would probably help a lot. And you still, like you said, would have room for the parking. So.
Okay. That seems like that's feasible.
Is that kind of what you were getting at, Will? I mean, I know you had some concerns, obviously, about the overall size of the structure, which I still do as well. But
yeah, the size is also part of that. When it moves to that footprint, it's not exactly what's on the Sanborn map, from what I recall on the footings that I saw in the backyard. But for a one-story structure, that goes back to where it was. that's what the guidelines, unless there's a hardship that I'm not aware of. That's what the guidelines say. And I'm just reading what it says. And I think it's a beautiful structure. I understand what you're doing, but it needs to get scaled way back, in my opinion, to fit where the other structure was, and that there's still footings far.
And recognizing what Will said earlier about down here in Biltmore Village, there are some Richard Sharp Smiths. The one that comes to mind to me with an accessory structure, and it may be the only one, I haven't done a survey or anything like that, is where the Tangles, I believe it is called, hair salon is. And it is a two-story building, as I recall, in the front, and then a very small one-story structure in the rear that would have been some sort of accessory unit long ago. But we also, I think, have to recognize that the period of significance for the village doesn't exactly overlap with the period of significance for this area. And, the rise of the automobile and all that kind of stuff is happening all during this period of time. And I believe I heard the applicant state that the foundation was 17 by 21, thereabouts. I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt. The application materials say 1,600 heated square feet. As far as trying to do the ratios of one building to the other. And I think it needs to be scaled down significantly myself.
If I can ask a quick question, if it's fair, I'm one of the new guys, so Ms. Kite, you'll cut me off if I'm not allowed. What is your intent for the use of the space above the ground, not in the basement? I'm gathering, and Will Hornaday helped to clarify. The concern seemed to be the height of the building. Again, is seen, the accessory building is seen from the street, and the width. And if tucking it behind helps, but if you are, I guess, would you be allowed to expand more underground, as it were? Is that what your use space, or if it's just like living space where it's obviously you're wanting sunlight, all this stuff? I think helping me get a sense of how you want to use that. It looks like a living space might help in us deciding things like lowering the roof level and some of those other things that help to get to the scale of the building. And again, this is part of my learning curve, so any of the other longtime members can jump in and correct me.
Yeah, my intent for the lower portion of it would just be storage.
But the space above ground that we would be seeing from the streets and from the alley and all this stuff, it's what we see here. It looks like it's a living structure, living unit.
Yeah, that would be the living space for my friends and family to stay in when they came to visit.
Okay. Well, that didn't help.
Yeah, it's a smaller. Yeah, it's a 1,600 square foot house. I have 2 kids and a wife, and it's enough space for us. But when I'm from Michigan, and I have family, and I currently live in Florida, so we have people visiting. We'll probably have people visiting both directions. So I just want to have an extra space for people to stay.
So the space, you're needing this amount of space, whether it's taller or whether it's longer or wider or whatever, you're sort of agnostic to, because you're looking for a purpose. Whereas if we can find your purpose and meeting the scale concerns that have been expressed, you would be amenable to that. So it's a concern matter of saying, hey, can we find the space you need that meets the configuration and confines of what they need?
Exactly. I'd like enough space for living space and storage, and acceptable to the scale of the other house, but also not, a 12 by 12 shed. There's currently one of those on the property. Doesn't look super great. So would like to change that.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And thanks for the indulgence of the others.
I want to talk a little bit about the windows. And I think one of my concerns about the windows may go away, Kenny, as you consider an option that puts the basement fully underground. Is we've got these sort of basement windows along the transition between the brick and the siding, and I don't see that as a detail that's coming through from the main house, and it starts to read taller for me, and doesn't do a lot to sort of mask the fact that there's a basement, so to speak, in terms of the scale and the massing of the house. And I think maybe that problem solves itself if you move forward to propose that the basement sort of we sort of push into the ground a little bit, because I don't see those same windows showing up on the main structure, and of course it starts to suggest a multi-story building, which we leap to a bigger mass when we're looking at multi-story structures, and so I think that that you might give some consideration to how important those windows are and whether they really are consistent with the house. I know, Alex, you had some other concerns about the windows and how we could better maybe connect the style of the windows from the main house with this house or this structure. It's not really a house, but and so I'd be interested in making sure that, Kenny, you get the feedback from us that you're looking for with regards to windows and some suggestions about how we might feel if other window configurations might be proposed moving forward.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Definitely to that. And my only other concern would be egress. So I don't know what windows would be necessary in the basement, maybe if they're below grade and you can't see them, with a window well or something. I wouldn't think you'd want to lose them all. I think you'd want to have some form of egress.
Yeah, that is probably an answer that Michael can give you. Is looking through the residential building code. The egress requirements vary depending on how you intend to use that space. Certainly, if people were sleeping down there, the requirement would be far different than if you're storing your Christmas ornaments and things like that down there. So, certainly providing that context for us when we look at this application moving forward, I think would be valuable for the commission to hear.
Okay.
And I would just add that, and maybe I mentioned this when I was giving my report, but I mentioned to Kenny that I just thought the windows, since it is an accessory structure, the easiest way to go is just to simplify, especially since the primary structure, the main windows are all fairly decorative with the 12 light double hung windows, and I don't think that would make sense for a modest accessory structure. So maybe just a 1/1 or something that was just very simplified. So if you all have any thoughts on that, please share.
Okay, Mr. Stillwell, do you want to continue this to the February meeting?
Yes, I would like to. And I also, as far as paint colors and things like that, I do plan on matching the main structure with the paint scheme that we choose for the auxiliary structure. But that's going to happen after. I don't know if I need to do a separate application at that time, but we're not quite there yet.
We could make it a condition on the approval, Kenny, that you follow up with staff once you've decided on the paint palette. I would mention that the resubmittal deadline is next Wednesday. So be pretty quick turnaround. I don't know if you can get it together between now and next Wednesday, great. We'll welcome you at the February meeting, but if you feel like you need more time, you might want to consider March. So just throwing that out there.
Okay, and can I notify you this Friday or Monday about that if I need an extension?
Yeah, that's okay. If
Okay.
you don't know today, we'll just you can just request to continue to February, and then we can follow up if you need to change it to March.
Okay, and just real quick, I want to revisit the porch just one more time, if we could. If we take away the posts and handrails and things like that, and just maybe do like a bracketed roof over, would that be more pleasing for the commission?
From my perspective, I think anything that that reduces the scale of it and sort of downplays the focus of it is certainly worth considering. I could appreciate the need for a covered entry, and I think that anything that can happen that sort of minimizes that roof line and the footprint and the scale of it is certainly going to improve the overall massing of the structure itself.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Gail, you've got comments?
I do have kind of a comment / question for my fellow commissioners. So looking at the standards under carriage houses, garages, and accessory structures, the bottom line to it is that the overall feeling of those accessory structures is that they're modest and they take second fiddle to the home, clearly. And I just wanted to ask the architects on the group or anybody else that has an opinion. I understand that large high pitch roof, the intent of it was to echo the front build, the main building. What are your thoughts on lowering that pitch, on making it so that it doesn't echo that front building? Because to me, that's a huge part of that visual hit from the street. And I was just curious about what you all felt about that.
I think from my perspective, I think it'd be an interesting study to do. I think that it's going to be a bigger distraction for me visually if the pitch is different, is the challenge. And of course, if the constant is matching the pitch of the roof, the only solution to shorter is either make it narrower. The proportion right now is square. And so a rectangular proportion, which I think is more in line with the Sanborn footprint, also would bring the ridge of that roof line down if it weren't as square as a footprint as it is now, is one strategy. Of course, lowering the bearing line of the eaves is an option, but at that point you get to a place where the ceilings start to become unmanageable. So I think it would be potentially more distracting in terms of congruity with the main structure if the pitch was different. But I think there's some geometry things that could be considered that might help without giving much up in terms of square footage, because that's not the only metric that we use to evaluate that could reduce the overall height of the structure in comparison to the existing house.
If there are no further comments, is this a good time for a motion to continue?
I think so. Kenny, I want to just make sure that we've given you some good feedback and content to work with moving forward before we entertain a motion.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, I move that we continue the application of 122 West Chestnut Street to the February 10, 2021 meeting.
Second, Mitchell.
Okay, thank you. We'll vote by roll call. Vice Chair Eaton.
Aye.
Commissioner Brusades.
Aye.
Commissioner Gardner.
Aye.
Commissioner Hornaday.
Aye.
Commissioner Lazarus.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Aye.
Myself, aye as well. And that motion carries.
Thank you, Kenny. You can just follow up with me later in the week.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a great evening.
Yeah, you too.
And we are in the agenda moving forward to items of new business. Alex, do we need to entertain a motion to continue the 250 Montford Avenue?
Yes.
Okay.
I move we continue 250 Montford Avenue to the February 10, 2021 meeting.
Thank you.
Second, Mitchell.
And that was Commissioner Mitchell on the second on that.
Correct.
Okay, we'll vote again by roll call. Vice Chair Eakins.
Aye.
Commissioner Brusades.
Aye.
Commissioner Gardner.
Aye.
Commissioner Hornaday.
Aye.
Commissioner Lazarus.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Aye.
Myself, aye as well. That motion also carries. Moving on to the next application is 81 Cortland Avenue, also in the Montfort Historic District. And I'm going to let Alex get us all up to speed on this application.
Thank you, Chair Kite. So this application is for construction of a new primary structure on Cortland Avenue. I included a site map in here just to orient everyone. These lots were newly subdivided last year, I believe. It was one of the first subdivisions that the commission considered. So these lots are a little bit tricky because they're kind of in this, you can see like it's a little bit of a bowl. If you've driven around from Houston Street around on Cortland, you can see down into this property. So the topography is a little bit tricky, but so the proposal is for roughly 2,700 square foot primary structure. And the tricky thing with the topography here is for all of these lots, for the most part, is going to be parking, as you might note. So that is definitely noted as a concern on my staff report. You can see it here on the site plan extending off of Cortland with an 18-foot wide curb cut and apron. And then it's probably a little more than 18 feet. So the parking comes up right to the front elevation. When the application was first submitted, or when I first met with the applicant and his architect, I noted to them a couple of things, the parking being one, the other being that when the application was first submitted, this L on the front of the house, where you see this gang of 3 windows, was protruding pretty far out. It was a little bit, in my opinion, out of proportion, especially if you look at it from the side angle. So there's a revised set of plans in your packet that shows this revised elevation, where he reduced it by, I think, 2 feet in terms of how much it extended out towards the street. So it's definitely a little bit better in terms of not appearing out of proportion. This gang of windows was changed, and overall, I think the architect he used to be on the HRC some years ago, so he is well versed in working with our design standards. So I feel like overall this project is pretty close to where it needs to be approved. I don't have any bright ideas about how to accommodate the parking. I did talk with them about trying to get it potentially down on this the side of the house. There seemed to be some question marks there about how much they would have to, or a retaining wall, and how much they would have to build out there to accommodate a driveway. I also made the suggestion that they could perhaps just do one parking space off to, try to tuck it kind of a little bit farther over here if possible, rather than having the 2 that would just, kind of just sit right in front of the house. I do think when I was working on my staff report, I was thinking through many of the lots that are left in the historic district, as you might know, such as the ones that were approved not too long ago on the corner of Cumberland and Cobble. They do, we are going to kind of see more lots like that have challenges around parking. So I think the guidelines do allow for parking where the topography is pretty limiting, although I still think even if it's allowed, it should be minimized to the extent possible. So that is the main thing I noted. There are some things still in my staff report that I listed as information that I noted as outstanding. I've since added the window specifications to the packet. We don't have the mechanical unit specifications. Obviously, that is not a big deal. We can just make that a condition. The other thing is that I asked the applicant and the architect to confirm the wall heights. There's a retaining wall on this side of the house. Let's see. kind of see it stretching along here. I didn't have dimensions for that or the little smaller wall that's up above behind this landscaping. So I got some like rough dimensions for those, but those will need to be verified. And so those are all my main points, and happy to answer questions for you all if you have any.
Alex, the correct square footage is the 2765 square footage?
2701.
Thanks.
Sure. It got reduced a little bit, obviously, with that, reduction of the length of the L. So to change that around, hopefully I got everything right. I was making a lot of last minute changes today.
Are there other questions at this time for Alex? Okay. At this point, I'm going to invite the applicant to provide any kind of additional information you'd like the commission to consider. Mr. Zalin, I presume you're here.
I am. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So is the floor open just to make commentary, or do you want to solicit questions first, or how would you like to proceed?
If there's anything that you'd like to add, and then we can respond with questions at this point. But if there's anything in response to things that Alex has mentioned, or anything that you'd like us to know sort of before we dive in with any questions that you have, or that we have, that would be appropriate.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. I won't take too much time, but I think, Alex codified the lots and the situation pretty well. It's a bit of a difficult area. I actually own a second lot there too. So, I did it. There was no topographical survey done prior to my purchasing of these lots. I performed a topographical survey, which helped to add some additional clarity. Pursuant to that, it clarified some issues, but it certainly, there's quite a presentation of what can and cannot be done. The full intention was to use as much of that building footprint or the building envelope as available. However, to put the parking area on the side. So based upon the topographical survey, we had a difficult time doing that. And Aaron Wilson wanted me to communicate that we did look at it, looking at I'm trying to think, I don't have it in front of me, which rendering it is, but the upper side where Alex was talking about putting some parking, and the comment from Aaron was that the retaining wall would have been closer to 10 to 12 feet there. So it's actually significantly taller if it's even possible to go on the side of the house. Then it would be even on that front, putting those parking spots on the front, which I think we're at about 6 feet or 6.5 feet for the primary wall, and then another 2 for the secondary wall. So the intent and purposes was to do that. Unfortunately, this looked like the best option based upon that topography. And then the other thing too, Alex, we did make the accommodation to shorten the length of that room. That was a great suggestion. And we took her up on that, and we agreed, as well as extending the porch 2 feet. So we actually had a net gain of only a 4-foot difference between the roof line of the porch, the front porch. It went from 6 feet to 8, and then shortened the width as well. So again, the net gain is 4 feet difference, which I think created more symmetry in the lot, on the facade of the house. And the intent is so everybody understands, if they've seen the plan, there's a full ADU which will have its own service and heating and water and electrical. So that's something that I was very big on. I think it's important for density. So that's kind of everything I wanted to say.
Commissioners, are there questions for the applicant? Okay, I am going to open the floor for any public comment that we may have. And following that, we will continue our conversation and give you some feedback, Aaron.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we don't have any callers in the queue.
Okay, thank you. We will close the floor for public comment, and I will open the floor for commissioner discussion, and certainly if any questions arise for Alex or for the applicant, we can address those at this time as well.
That's a good example, Chair Kite, of an elongated roof pitch. Back to the previous case, what Alex is showing on yeah, that too. Not about this, but just about the other one. I need to move on.
I think from my perspective, obviously we spend a lot of time in the commission talking about parking in Montford. We feel like every application nearly talks about parking, and so there's not really a surprise that this one will spend a fair amount of time talking about parking. And I know it certainly comes up in the subdivisions and some of these newer lots that are being created in the district. I wish I had more clarity on, and that's me for not having read right prior to this application the guidelines around parking with regard to parking in the front. In general, we know that that's not particularly in alignment with the standards for Montford, and so I'd love to talk a little bit with this commission, maybe Alex, and get some clarity from you on the guidelines. It looks like, Alex, the Montford standards in the Google Drive are locked. It's probably the same issue we were having with some of the other.
Darn, I'm sorry. I will fix that, but I can read them. I have them pulled up. I can read to you really quickly what they say, and then I'll go back in and share, or I can share it with you first, whichever you guys prefer.
I think you could probably just read it for the time being.
Okay. You get to the right page. So these guidelines are a little bit funny in that, usually we're kind of referencing the guidelines on the standards on the odd number pages because they're the kind of numbered list. So I'll tell you that these do contradict themselves a little bit. Let's see. So if you look at page 50, what it says is, because Montford is predominantly residential, large off-street parking areas were not typical. The introduction of additional off-street parking must be weighed carefully and should only be considered if the parking area can be located unobtrusively in the rear or rear side yard. No parking will be allowed in the front yard. And then if you go to the next page, it says, parking shall not be located in the front yard or in the side yard unless there is no access to the rear yard due to the slope of the land, or there is no room in the rear yard because the depth of the lot is too shallow. New off-street parking areas should never significantly alter the site topography nor destroy the residential character of the site by eliminating landscape features. So it's sort of hovering in that weird place, which that was where my suggestion that if it was, it obviously is meeting the standard that where the topography or the slope of the land is not easily accommodated. But I still think it might help to minimize it to one space. I don't know. I'm interested to hear all of your thoughts. I don't have any other great ideas as far as solutions.
It's funny because this lot is the first lot on Cortland that is in the district.
Yeah.
Right.
The whole street is on-street parking
Yes.
in front of house parking. And so this is the entry to Montford proper. So I'm kind of caught too on, do you just let this creep further, or does there need to be a hard line that Montfort doesn't do that? Historic Montfort doesn't do that. And I could, it's a crappy lot you got to get down there. I don't see how you get down there.
Yeah, and I think that was the intent of that number 3B on page 51, where it's, saying no parking is allowed. And that's the case in, with most of the historic buildings. But obviously there's not a ton of land in Montfort that hasn't been developed, but obviously what hasn't been developed is mostly not the harder to develop on lots. They haven't been developed for a reason. So I think that, I do think that I agree with what you're saying, that it is kind of like, is this setting a precedent? But I do think that we're just going to keep running into this issue repeatedly with these newer lots. If we're, I think the commission just needs to be mindful about how they, that where that gray area is between no parking in the front yard, but then saying that unless the slope of the land, unless there's no access to the rear yard due to the slope of the land, or there is no room in the rear yard. So it's just hovering and finding the right balance in there.
Well, it's complicated as well by having such a large home with an ADU, which would be 3 cars or at least 2 cars. Kind of complicates that if you do that one parking space. Kind of leave somebody on the street.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Were you finished, Will? Sorry. Shannon, I think, has her hand raised.
I was just going to, if the commission isn't already aware, just to let you know that off-street parking is actually not required in Montfort for the UDO. You can park on the street. If on-street parking is available. So I don't know, I don't recall this part of Cortland if it is available, but just in general, as it relates to all of these newly created lots, I was just going to let the commission know that there could be some instances where just simply parking on the street is perhaps the best option.
Alex, could you go back to the standards for just one more second? You had read a portion that talked about significantly altering the topography to accommodate parking. And that, I'm weighing whether or not I have concerns about retaining walls there. Obviously, with heavily sloped lots, retaining walls become important to make things flat, and parking a lot of times really wants to be flat, but it's also pretty substantial altering of the topography. And so I want to maybe have you reread that for me for a minute, please.
Okay, it says new off-street parking areas should never significantly alter the site topography nor destroy the residential character of the site by eliminating landscape features or a substantial portion of the rear yard.
I do think from a sightline perspective, it's not a particularly visible, certainly from the front. But it does sort of feel like a significant alteration of the topography. And from that perspective, it looks to me from the renderings that basically there's potentially a good bit of fill in the front yard to make the sort of porch area and around to the side flatter than what the original topography, if I'm looking at the site plan correctly, would indicate.
Yes, that's correct. I don't think that there is a way you could build on this lot without upgrading it so that it, sloped more gradually away from the street to accommodate a front entryway, unless you were just like, I guess, constructing some kind of stairs as a walkway from the street down into the lot.
I mean, I think it's also worth noting, obviously, this is not a historic structure in the district, so it would not, we are often asked to look at new construction in a somewhat different light than we would if this were a historic property. And I'm interested in hearing from some of the other commissioners as well. And this is a, good sized project. And I think it's important for us to make sure we've addressed everything we can address and get some consensus building feedback for the applicant.
Hey, Alex, what are the square footages of the neighboring houses to this property?
There's not anything around this house. There's this little one at 4 Houston Street is a non-contributing structure. I can pull up the property card for that one, but it's a little like 1-story, like a little, not a ranch, but kind of like a bit that between like a cottage and a ranch. But this is like you're outside of the district once you go farther southwest on Cortland. So there's not really any kind of context to tie it to as from a square footage standpoint. I didn't think in terms of the overall square footage that it was, inappropriate in a way, especially because of the way it was designed from the street perspective level. It's not overwhelming from the front elevation. It is, it's pretty big. It does have that finished basement if you're looking at it from the rear, which you will see from Houston Street until these other lots are built on. But
from my point of view, it seems like a sympathetic addition in the neighborhood, in that fringe area, knowing that area of the neighborhood pretty well.
Are there commissioners with strong concerns about parking that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I take seriously the prohibition against having parking in the front of the house, especially with something this large that will stand out as much as this will. It's not going to be a great prospect, a great perspective.
Other folks? May take silence as no one strongly objects.
I'm a little bit conflicted about this, but does it say in the packet what the material of the driveway? Is it just concrete?
Yes.
yes, it's concrete.
So I'm open to using whatever, you think is more aesthetically pleasing for that material, if you think that's something better option.
I just didn't know if there, and I'm not a designer either, but if there was something that was a little less harsh than concrete would be, that would maybe blend in a bit better if it is in the front.
Yeah, I don't have a huge familiarity which is sort of contemporary for the time, but something that's permeable maybe would make some sense. I don't know if that's a gravel composite, something like that.
The guidelines do speak to having pervious surfaces, or at least reducing impervious surface.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some value in considering that for sure. I do appreciate the landscaping in that sort of tiered retaining wall around the corner. I do think that the opportunity is there to provide some screening. Obviously, it's sort of screening from the non-historic district side of the property, but I think having something to look at in the front besides the cars, and I think that's been sort of primary driver of the no parking in the front thing. I don't see a lot of other options without a sort of radical change to the floor plan and to the massing of the house and the size of the house to accommodate it. Even then, the challenge of the grades is significant there. I think not to relive old conversations with regards to subdivisions, but certainly many of the subdivisions that we've reviewed in this commission in the recent past in Montford have been these very challenging sites with somewhat limited options in terms of how to build on there. And so we're having those conversations at that level as well. But I think once it is moves beyond approval of a subdivision, both from this body and from planning and zoning, I think we have to be open to the conversation about something actually getting built on on those lots that were allowed to be subdivided. And so I think that it, I think for me, I would have, maybe greater concerns about it if it were a historic property with a historic structure on it. I do think this is in some ways precedent setting for the lots certainly right adjacent to it and other lots that we've talked about in the last year or so as well. So I think as a commission, we need to be considering making sure that we can be consistent in how we make these decisions as we look to this property and others that we know will be developed in the near future.
Is it possible to, and I don't know the answer, if the owner of this lot owns the other three? Do you own the other 3 lots?
No.
Okay.
The only other lot I own is 8 Houston, which is directly diagonal to this lot.
Because it seems like it's going to have the same problem when you look at the topography lines from the packet on Cumberland as well. If there was a communal parking area for these, but you still have to get down there. I'm of the opinion that, and as Shannon said, that on-street parking is allowed, and there needs to be a difference between the historic district, and it's going to cause, it's going to cause problems on Cumberland, and it's going to cause problems here, I think, with the additional on-street parking. I assume it might, but parking in the front yard, just by that line that says no parking will be allowed in the front yard is, and I know it gets watered down a little bit more later on, but there's a strong feeling when this was written that that's not what Montford wanted to be. Was not about the car. and this is a large portion of your front yard is paved for a car. That's visible from the street. I think it drops off quite a bit, the east side of your lot. So that's where I'm struggling.
I mean, I can address the other lot if you want. What we're trying to do there, and may be helpful. I mean, we, for example, on that lot, to accommodate that, I have plans already, at least partially committed to that. And just so you understand, it'd be advantageous to move the building to one side of the lot line. Again, I don't have the north-south, my bearings on that, but we actually decided to move it to the other lot line, which creates another set of downstream issues. So the upper part of the lot is where we were moving, originally had decided to do it, which would have put the parking on the side of the lower end, where the existing structure is on the lower side of Houston. And it was so steep and untenable that you couldn't even do it. So I had to move the building the opposite side, which makes the foundation a little bit more untenable. So it's sort of, like pushing on a balloon there. You kind of push one side and something else pops out the other side. So we've endeavored to put the parking on the upper side, towards the confluence of Cortland and Houston on the other side of that lot. And we're successful in doing that with minimizing a retaining wall, which would be probably a couple feet. That's at least the preliminary plan as it exists today. So just to give you some perspective.
I think feedback that we've heard regarding the parking is consideration of use of other materials to make it less impervious and soften it to some extent. There's been one suggestion for abandoning the front yard parking in favor of on-street parking on Cortland as a way to meet the guidelines. We've not heard a great deal of support for leaving the parking how it is.
Can I make one other note? It's really uncommon in Montford to have an 18-foot wide apron, like entry into a parcel 2, unless we're talking about kind of a almost a shared driveway. Those are where they're kind of immediately next to each other, but on 2 different properties. And so that was why I made the suggestion of narrowing it to 1 car and limiting in that way, because I don't think it makes sense to have an 18-foot wide cut into the property. So I think at the very least it would be helpful to narrow it to some degree.
I would agree with that, Alex. I also don't particularly disagree with any of the other suggestions. I think it's problematic in the format that it's been presented, but it does sound like there's some willingness on the part of the commission to consider alternative solutions to the parking that would either provide for street parking or some modifications to a driveway in the front yard. We've also not really talked about the massing of the house or the style or the look of the house. And I think, Gail, I appreciate your description of that. I do think it's a nice solution. I like the scale of the front of the house, that it's not quite as big as it appears from the back. I think the scale is appropriate in the front for the district. And so I think, as a design solution, the house is a pretty good one. I don't have particular concerns about that. And so, as with many applications, it comes down to the parking, which probably, Aaron, was not a particular surprise when you came here.
No. Yeah, I want to be as accommodating, obviously, as possible, and I understand the concern. It's a very gray area, and it's a transition area between what you consider proper and not. So I'm really cognizant of that and mindful of that.
I think at this point, the options for you are to amend your application today to reflect some of the changes that we've suggested. And I don't know that the commission's given us a really strong sense of one solution over the other. The other option would be to request a continuance and give yourself and your designer some opportunities to consider in more detail some of the feedback that you've gotten today and come back with a solution, a proposed change to the solution that you've presented.
I mean, I'm actually open to doing whatever the commission sees to be the best fit for the greater good of Montfort. So I'm not wedded to anything in particular. I would accept certainly on-street parking. That comes with other issues that unrelated to me in terms of congestion with the street and things like that. But, I understand the consideration there. So I'm willing to accept what the overall consensus is of the commission, for sure.
If I may, on the off-street parking issue, Kenilworth is not a historic district, but it's a historic a neighborhood. And we have this issue where it causes safety issues. It causes damage to vehicles. We get scraped cars all the time. I don't know how wide this particular street is. I'm sorry I did not get a chance to drive through here, but that's going to be one of my bugaboos, is to the extent that kitchens and bathrooms, we have to adjust to modern life. And I understand we don't want to try and park along here, and then you try and get trucks through here, try and get other cars. It is a nightmare on Childs Avenue. And so my soapbox is always going to be, when it comes to off-street parking, is take into consideration the neighbors and the other people who have to try and get through these neighborhoods. Off my soapbox. Thanks.
And one solution that people in that vicinity use, and other places in Asheville, is more almost like a street widening where the cars are parked still on the side of the road, but on the property, like on the right of way, sort of, that's created. And if you go further down that street, you can see where other folks have used that, which is a little bit of a compromise between a full pull-in straight driveway that takes up the whole front yard, and maybe it's a way to minimize, that wide appearance in the front of the building as part of the entry. I don't know. It's just a thought I had. Not sure if it would actually work, but.
I would be open to that as well. I mean, it looks like the one that if Alex has up now, that creates almost like an extended apron, though, that goes almost the length of the house. Is that?
So I would just add, going back to what Shannon said, there's parking isn't allowed in the front setback. I'm not sure how that was created. So that actually isn't an option. Right now you're cutting it close. I did send your site plan, or we sent your site plan to our development services staff to see whether they could approve this from a zoning perspective. And I think from what I know, it would be probably okay, but it would be pretty close to what they would not allow. So I don't think that they would let you do kind of what Gail is describing, although that is, I'm sure that there are plenty of places where that exists, where it just didn't get an approval or just is old and has been there for a while. So I think I'm interested to hear what the commission would want to do, but my thought is that, Aaron, you go back to work with Aaron a little bit to tweak the site plan to see what might work from a design perspective. Because I don't know, he might have some other creative ideas. I don't know kind of what the limitations are with that wall, that retaining wall, where it is. If you could, pull the parking over a little bit more to the side. I think the landscaping alongside it obviously helps, and it is stipulated by the guidelines that driveways and parking will be screened with landscaping. But if there's any way to minimize it or kind of tuck it a little bit farther off to the side rather than it being kind of right front and center, I think would be a step in the right direction.
could you bring up the first one with the topography again,
Sure.
please? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I see your point. Yeah, just, you can see again, I don't know the direction, southeast, northeast. The downslope corner there of the lot, and the idea was to create this step down approach to actually create some screening for that wall. You see it steps down 24 inches, and then it sort of fans out at a 20-degree angle, more or less, from the retaining wall that goes along the foundation line. So it's right at the end of the building envelope, and they're consistent of the 6 feet right there. So there is a possibility of doing that, like you said, Alex, and getting probably 6 feet over would make sense if we wanted to maintain that 2-step look to give it some aesthetic appeal from the side.
Does the commission have any thoughts on that in terms of what you're most comfortable with from an approval standpoint? Do you think that if they work on the site plan to limit it to narrow it and to move it over to the southwest, I think is that direction there that where the walls are, would you want to see that? Would you want to make it a condition on the CA and let staff look at it? What are your thoughts?
For me personally, I think all of the suggestions that have been made are moving in the right direction, including reducing the width, moving it over, changing the surface of it, I think are all valid considerations. My concern, Aaron, for you would be without some additional time in talking with a designer, do you not sort of fully vet the solution? Yeah. And get the most creative opportunity there for you, so that it does work for you long term, but also better meets the intent of the standards. And so I think, from my perspective, be more concerned about just conceding without a full opportunity to think through what you really want to do.
Okay. I think I'm really agnostic to the solution. I think it's only I'm sorry, the gentleman that spoke earlier, I'm mindful of trying to reduce congestion on the street because of on-street parking. That was the intent. I'm not wedded to saying I have to have a driveway, but it's the way of reducing that. Now, maybe that's not it's an ask. It's not really a requirement. So I'm somewhat agnostic to having the parking in the front or having parking at all. It just seemed I was just trying to find some middle ground that would make some sense. So if you came back and said, we can't do it at all, I'd work around those issues. So I want to be as accommodating as I can, and it's not something that I'm wedded to. So, but I understand the flip side is to actually get, Aaron has a much better eye than I do in terms of how to do this and be creative with this approach. So I can see both sides of it. I think fundamentally, if it comes down to if parking in the front of the house at any level, whether it's a smaller apron, different materials, whatever the accommodations, if those isn't acceptable to the commission, then I think it becomes moot. So I don't know if that is the case. If we say, look, park in the front of the house, no go, then we can, whatever we do is moot. So.
I think that we've certainly heard feedback from one commissioner that would be their preference would be to say no to off-street parking in the front. Certainly, I think the commission would feel that met the intent of the standards to abandon off-street parking altogether. But I don't know that we've heard a lot of voicing that that's the only solution that other folks are interested in.
Okay.
And because we have had consideration for some other suggestions that would allow for some parking in the front. So it's a little hard to predict as the chair, and so I think without a decision on your part in what your preference is, it's a little hard to get additional feedback from the commission with regards to a particular proposal beyond what we've seen today.
Yeah. No, I understand. I'm not familiar with the process. I apologize. No, it's just a simple majority, or I'm not sure how that works, but I understand. We've internally between Aaron, me, and Aaron W. We have looked at multiple options. We tried to find multiple opportunities. We looked at moving it further to the south. I think it's the south again. I think it's the south. It's further down the street, or even the opposite side, which I had talked about earlier, and it looked like this was the most tenable, and that's why we ended up here. I'm certainly, again, the latency in the process, for me, it's been kind of a bit, as you might know, it's been a bit latency. I'm not in this tremendous hurry, of course, but certainly want to proceed as quickly as possible. Also want to do all the right things that meets the standards and is acceptable to the commission. So it's kind of a difficult one. I mean, if you believe, if it's the recommendation of the commission that I should go back and do that and sort of vet out other things, then I'm willing to do that, of course.
Well, and I think I would look to other commissioners for some feedback on that. And I think, Aaron, if you were convicted about a particular solution and wanted to amend your application to that effect, we could entertain a motion today. I'd like to hear maybe from other commissioners at this point.
I can give my 2 cents on the driveway. My feeling is that since, the design standards are very clear with don't park in front of the house. That's just not in keeping with the district. And I understand that we also don't want to set precedent with, somebody pointing to this decision saying, well, they have a driveway right in front of the house. But I think because it's a new property, because it's an infill, because it's not interfering or getting in the way of any historic landscape features that are there, because there aren't. This is kind of a blank slate here. That for all those reasons, that it makes sense to have a driveway in the front of the house. I think as much as it can be minimized and made modest would be good, as much as maybe you could use materials. I like the idea of more permeable materials. That's not going to be quite as in your face as a big swath of concrete. But that's my opinion, and I do feel like that a driveway in front of this particular property can be made to mesh with the guidelines.
Alex, what were you thinking of in terms of the width of the driveway instead of 18 feet? Were you thinking about 12 feet or what?
Yeah, I think that's the standard driveway width. I should know, and it looks like you have room, but this would be something to check with Aaron on. The driveway apron itself has to be set at least 5 feet off of the front property corner. So that's just something to be aware of.
Wow.
I do want to note that it would probably, as I'm sitting here like processing this, and I think I would be more comfortable. I know this is sort of a small-ish detail in the grand scheme of things, but I think I would be more comfortable with this coming back to you all, especially if it is to some degree setting precedent for these newly subdivided lots. And also if there's any kind of material that is like a pervious paver or something, that it's not that you all couldn't approve it. It's just that the guidelines say that they will be considered on a case-by-case basis. And that is something that is more subjective, that really is not appropriate for staff to approved. So I would be my suggestion that that Aaron and Aaron work together to kind of look at the solution that might work best for your programming, Aaron, and what you're comfortable with, and then come back for a second review, and then hopefully it can just be really quick and we can just move through it. Does that make sense to everyone?
Alex, I would be far more comfortable with that approach as well.
Okay.
Yeah, ditto.
This is Janice. I just wanted to mention the guideline, or the standard. There's a second part to that standard, and I don't know if everybody's reading it. For those who are concerned about setting precedent, it says no parking shall be located in the front yard or side yard unless there is no access to the rear yard due to the slope of the land, or there is no room in the rear yard because the depth of the lot is too shallow. So there's some criteria added there that might apply to this lot, probably that wouldn't apply to all lots. So I just wanted to make sure that the commissioners are reading that full standard, if that helps.
Yeah, we did talk through that standard. So sorry, Will or whoever.
Janice, how much of that is? I understand what you're saying, but the footprint of the house kind of dictates that there's no more room, more than the along with the slope. So they worked together to force this to where there's no place for us to wiggle.
Okay. Yeah, so you can look at it that way. And I know sometimes when you're looking at even subdividing a lot, it becomes a matter of what could you build there at all? And it ends up being maybe a very small house oriented in a certain way, but and then it will pass subdivision. So you're right. Part of that is how large they're making the house. It did look like it sloped significantly in the back there. So.
Well, and I think it is really more of an or thing. I mean, I know that they can be related to each other, but it's not, there is room on the northeast side of the lot to put a driveway, but it's just not, it just would be a big challenge due to the topography. So I think even if the house, even with the house the size that it is, it's still mostly the topography that's dictating the challenge, but.
Can I just make a comment? So that unless is an interesting word too, because so I didn't realize. I guess I must have missed that. So that is an important word there. So I thank you for reading that. I didn't almost have missed that. So it is not either or. And then I will tell you, the intent of the structure, that the building envelope is quite long and shallow in general. Just in general, if you look at the actual measurements, it's quite long in terms of road frontage, but very shallow in terms of depth when most houses are turned the other way, really. They're more, longer in nature. And that applies to the Houston lot itself, actually, as much. The building envelope is longer and more narrow, much easier to accommodate. This took quite a few iterations, even just to come up with this plan. And the intent of a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath was to make a property that was sort of, not so constrained in the potentially of the people that might inhabit the property. That not just I'm trying to squeeze every square footage piece out, because I was actually trying to reduce as much as I possibly could. I tried to make the room sizes and so forth as small as I could. That was the intent. But before the commission broke, if we ended up moving that to the north, I think it's the northeast side, Alex, the other opposite side of the house, the upper end with the confluence of the two streets. And we ended up doing a plan that was try to get it on the side of the house, and there was a large retaining wall of 8 to 10 feet, just hypothetically. Would that be something that the commission would be agreeable to, or is that something that would just create another set of downstream concerns?
And to my mind, in that location with that topography, with appropriate landscaping that might mitigate the visibility of the retaining wall and so on, it would certainly be something I'd consider.
Okay.
Strongly.
the conversation with Aaron Wilson, the architect, was that the retaining wall would be quite high, some in the order of 10 feet potentially. And obviously you need to be careful with the pitch of the actual driveway itself, to try to reduce that retaining wall. Nothing over a 20 pitch, because it does slope down, and we know what happens when you get some ice or any type of freezing and it slopes down, you end up in the yard.
One last slight perspective is I would approve, or I would feel comfortable with approving on-street only parking and handling this. And I just for traffic calming, and also just kind of bringing this to a head and saying, if this is for neighbors to get involved and let them know what they think, I don't know, Aaron, if you've spoken with any of your neighbors about this plan, but I know I'm just looking ahead, like Chair Kite was saying about these other Cumberland Circle and things that are exactly the same thing, where there's a split up lot with a very steep drop off the road, and it's going to be really hard to park on it. So I would be fine with on-street parking as this is shown now. Because I think the house is a good design, and I think the road it's pretty empty. There's nothing on the north side of the road, and I think it could handle it. And even if you do limit it to one parking space, there's still people going to be parking on the street at a house this size, I assume, especially with an accessory dwelling unit. That's my 2 cents. Or that's my statement.
I think I just want to go back to a comment that you made, Will, about talking with the neighbors. We do notice all the properties within 200 feet of a subject property for major works as required by state statute. So all the neighbors should have received a notice and have the link or to look at plans online. So I haven't heard any comments or concerns from any of the neighbors about the proposal, but
to be fair though, Alex,
there is parking shown on the site and they would be more concerned if there were only on-street parking. I don't know. I do know that I have worked with multiple folks around Arborvale and Houston and Cortland. Generally speaking, that area is very tricky with parking, especially at Arborvale. If you go through there, it's one way, but it's even still being one way is a little bit dodgy, especially from a life safety perspective. So I, could see that even if you all allow at least one parking space, that's one less car that's got to park on the street. I think it's worth the applicant considering some of the suggestions that were made today that might work for him, and then seeing what you all think about the solution that they arrive upon. Because I do agree with Janice. I think that's why the provision and the guidelines for when the site has limitations like the steepness of the topography, I think that's obviously why that guideline was created. So I do think that you all should consider it. It's not ideal, but it's also on the edge of the district, as you all said. It's not in an area where it's going to, obscure any other architectural features or landscape features, etc. So I don't know. I feel like I could support parking there if it were either on the other side or at least minimized on the southwest side to the extent possible.
I think, Aaron, at this point, if you are inclined to consider Alex's suggestion to continue the project, that would be something you would request to us for a continuance, and then we would make a motion around that request.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I understand this is a broad, potentially broader issue than this one property, and I'm sensitive to that. So I understand that, and I understand the precedence nature of it. So there's varying opinions and views of it. So I think continuing a month would give the commission time to think about it independently, and then perhaps when we come back, we have another solution, some bifurcated approach that would maybe work better. I think the suggestions everybody made were good ones, and so carry those back and continue would be certainly, I'd be amenable to that.
Okay.
So are we going to March with this application or February, sir?
I'm sorry, I misheard you.
Yes. So are you asking to come back in March or February?
Oh, in February for sure.
Alex, what was the deadline for the February meeting?
The deadline for resubmittal is next Wednesday.
So we have 1
Aaron?
week. Okay, that should be plenty. That should be enough time.
Okay, then I move that we continue the 81 Cortlandt Avenue application to the February 10th, 2021 meeting.
Second, Mitchell.
Roll call vote on this motion. Vice Chair Akins.
Aye.
Commissioner Mercedes.
Aye.
Commissioner Gardner.
Aye.
Commissioner Hornaday.
Aye.
Commissioner Lazarus.
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Vaughn.
Aye.
Myself, aye as well. That motion carries. And Aaron, we look forward to seeing you again next month.
Well, yeah, thank you to everybody. Really, it was a pleasure. It was a good process. So thank you very much. And should I just drop from the call? Yeah.
Yes, you can just drop off and then just let me know in between now and next week if you have questions or want to follow up on anything. Happy to help.
Great. Thank you to Alex again for marshaling this all together. I know it's like herding cats. So, but thank you and really appreciate it. Okay. Thanks again. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Aaron. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Chair Kite, it's Benjamin Mitchell. Do you have a quorum if I were to step away for a family obligation?
That's a great question.
Let me check. Can look in the sidebar. Emily, I was also going to see if you wanted to take a short break.
I was just getting ready to suggest a short break. I think we end up with 8 left. 1, 2, 3. There would be 8 of us.
Yes, so that's fine. We only need 7.
Okay, well, I'm going to excuse myself. Thanks you guys for your time.
All right, thank you. I would like to recommend that we take a break. We've been at it for about 2 hours, and I know that there'll be plenty to talk about, I think, with the next application. So, Alex, does it feel good to do 5 minutes? Is that enough time for everyone?
That's fine with me. If that's good with everybody else?
I think that works.
Okay, so we can reconvene at 6:06?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Margie, can you hear me? You're on mute. I want to do a quick sound check before they come back. David?
Yeah, man, I got you.
Margie?
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm getting doubled. Somebody tell me I don't have any.
It'll stop now. Now that everyone's out and it's just us, it will stop. It should.
All right. Peter and Denise, can you guys hear me? And I want to hear you guys, make sure we're good. Lee Woodby, you're on mute. You want to hear me? Oh, Peter, I hear you. Say something. You sound pretty. I want to do a quick sound check before they come back. David?
Yeah, man, I got you.
Margie?
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm getting double. Somebody tell me
Still?
I don't have any.
Stop now. Now that everyone's out and it's just us, it will stop. It should.
Are you guys hearing a 30-second delay? You guys hear me? I want to hear you guys. Make sure we're good. This is crazy. John and Lee, can you guys hear us? You want to hear me? Oh, Peter, I hear you. Say something. You sound pretty. I want a quick sound check before they come back. David?
Yeah, man, I got you.
Margie?
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm getting double. Somebody tell me I don't have any.
Stop now. Now that everyone's out and it's just us, it will stop. It should.
Are you guys hearing a 30-second delay?
Yes.
You guys hear me?
We're on a loop.
I want to hear you guys. Make sure we're good. This is crazy. John and Lee, can you guys hear us? Hear me? Oh, Peter, I hear you. Say something. You sound pretty. I want a quick sound check before they come back. David?
Yeah, man, I got you.
Margie?
Yeah, I'm here, but I'm getting double. Somebody tell me I don't have any.
Hey guys, I would recommend that everybody mute except for the person who's testing their audio.
30-second delay. You guys hear me? I want to hear you guys. Make sure we're good.
So oftentimes when you experience something like that, it's because there's one individual who has something wonky going on. They're phoning in and using their PC at the same time or something like that. So I would test you all one at a time if that's what you're trying to do.
Thank you. This is Sean Bowman. I'd really like to just ask Peter and Denise to speak up to make sure we can hear them.
And Peter and Denise, are you phoning in or are you on through the computer?
I see them on the list, but I can't put their saying anything. I don't hear them.
Yeah, I don't either. Alex, just you may have noticed I stopped your presenting so I could put up a note.
Yeah, that's fine. I figured that was what you're.
Just so you know, you have to start again.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. I figured that was the case. So.
Peter and Denise, do you want to unmute yourselves and test your audio?
We can't hear you. I saw your microphone turn green, but if you're talking, we can't hear you.
They're coming in now. I'm on the phone with them. They're going to try it out.
Okay.
Shannon, this is Sean. They seem to think that you guys have muted them and they're trying to unmute and they can't. I don't know if there's any ability.
I think when we have a large number of people, it will automatically mute, but let me see if I can't.
We can't unmute them.
Yeah, it says only Peter and Denise can unmute themselves.
Am I muted?
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
All right, Denise is going to call in, try that, and then we'll have to make sure he can share his screen. So stand by, please.
And Sean, who's going to be speaking? It seems like we have a number of people will have to do a new swearing in. We have a number of folks who weren't sworn in originally.
We, so two things. If there's too many, we could drop a couple if we need to. Peter Looper from MHA Works will be speaking and presenting. I will speak only if he needs assistance with a question that he may not have an answer to. And then we have Lee Woodby and John Toller from United Elevator. Same story. They're here. They'll sit in the background. And if there's a specific question related to the elevator or a fixture that Peter may not have the answer to, they can answer that for us.
Okay, well, we'll probably go ahead and get you all sworn in just in the event if there's a question, then we don't have to interrupt each time and swear somebody in. So.
Okay, thank you. Alex, thank you for helping get us all on here. I appreciate it.
Can y'all hear us?
Hello there. Can you guys hear us now?
We can.
Okay, good.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so we've got the sound check.
Yeah, turn that up.
I appreciate the willingness to consider options there. I understand where this is.
And mute us. I'm going to mute us for the moment.
I can't hear what
They're not saying anything. Sean, are you guys saying anything? Are we missing something?
We are not. I think the next step is we're all going to get sworn in. Is that your screen, Denise and Peter? Are you guys presenting right now?
No, that's my
we
screen.
will not be, we're not going to. Alex would be presenting.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Oh, we should start the video, though. That's the thing that here.
The video appears to be on.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are we?
Can y'all see us?
No. I can't, unless you're maybe not in my little, not sure. There's so many people on here. I may not be seeing everyone.
Well, for some reason, everything appears to be.
Oh, I see it. We're right there.
Yeah, we're in there.
Yeah, we're in there.
We're on your screen up at the top. Yeah,
We can hear you. That's the important thing.
Okay, we are. It looks like we are also on the screen we're looking at up in the upper right.
Okay, I probably can't see you because I have presenting on my screen. So
Yep.
is
Yeah,
that- are we-
everybody's screen is going to look a little different. So we see your phone number,
Sure.
but
So Alex, this is Sean. I think we have everybody on that we need.
Okay, great. I will turn it over to Chair Kite and she can get everyone sworn in.
Okay. Alex, just a brief note for the official record. I wanted to make sure to disclose in my own sort of professional life, I was a member of one of the design and construction teams that interviewed for this project previously. I don't expect it to impact my ability to do the work in terms of review of this project. So I did just want to make sure that was clear for the record.
Thank you.
And we will go ahead and swear in. I'm going to read the oath to all of you, and then I will call each of your names individually so that you can affirm the oath one at a time so that it's clear for the record. If you wouldn't mind, for those of you that we can see, to raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information you present during the hearing for a certificate of appropriateness before the Historic Resources Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Peter?
Yes, I do.
Sean?
Yes, I do.
Carl? Maybe not here.
He may not be on.
Okay. Margie?
Sorry, I was muted.
Yes,
This is
I do.
Carl. I do.
Yes, I do.
All right. Carl, we'll back up to you. Carl, can you affirm for me, please? How about David?
I do.
Denise?
I do.
Lee?
I do.
John?
I do.
Rusty?
I don't think Rusty's on.
Okay. Carl, I'm going to circle back around to you for one last check, so we don't miss your affirmation if you're on. It maybe doesn't look like he's on the list.
I would be confident saying he probably won't say anything on the call, so maybe it's a moot point.
Well, if we come back around to it, we can touch back on that point if we need to. Okay, Alex, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for a staff report on this application.
Thank you, Chair Kite. So just to provide you all with some context, the existing elevators, hopefully you've all had an opportunity to experience them over time. They're lovely, beautiful old elevators that are manually operated. Our capital projects department has been considering for some time modernizing the elevators, in part due to the elevator on the far left is the only one out of the three that accesses the basement, and it has been out of commission for quite some time. The other two elevators are fully operable, but they do obviously require kind of constant maintenance and repair because they are so old. And as you might imagine, some of the mechanical equipment is very old and also has some, there's a mercury piece in the upper story of our building. And so there are multiple reasons for the desire by the city to upgrade the elevators or to modernize them into non-manually operated elevators. So the first image, I'm just going to go through. There's a if you look at the staff report, you'll see the CA request is has a fair amount of components. So I'm just going to kind of pick through. I will say that this application did come to the commission, or not this exact application, but an application for modernization came to the commission back in 2018. At that point, it was fairly conceptual what was being proposed. And so the city ended up contracting, doing a design build contract. So that is where we are at present. And so the group that's with us today, they're all part of varying businesses that are part of that team that are working on the design build. I think overall the current application is way more successful than what we saw before, just based on the amount of original material that will be preserved. So I'll just go through some of the items that will be changes, and then we can go through any questions that you have. So basically, as you're looking at the doors and the surrounds are different depending on which floor you're on. So if you're on the main floor, this is what you'll see from the outside. So the original brass doors will unfortunately need to be replaced, but they are contain asbestos. So, but otherwise, all the surrounds and the floor indicators will be preserved and restored as needed. The call plates on the exterior wall that you see in between the cab on the far left and the middle one, those need to be replaced to be ADA compliant. I think there's still some things to be worked out when construction plans are created, but it's my understanding that from the architects that they think they can recast from the original plates, and then they'll be the same size. The biggest change will be that the mother of pearl buttons that are there cannot be reused. They will need to be, I think, a bigger button that will also need to be illuminated. And then another change you'll see on the first floor will be between the other two, between the middle cab and the right cab, there will be a fireman call station there that will be match the regular call station in dimension and appearance. And so those are kind of like the main changes that you'll notice from the outside on the first floor. The other floors have more basic steel doors, so those will be replaced, but will obviously look pretty similar to what's there now. So I kind of organized this to some degree, my slides to some degree, to kind of follow what was typed up in the CA request. But this is the picture on the bottom is it's a threshold into the elevator cab. Those will need to be replaced to accommodate the new doors. So I did get a couple of images last minute that I added to the application packet that I'm happy to pull up if it's helpful. The new thresholds will be brass, and obviously new brass does not look the same as brass that is this old. So it will be pretty starkly different right off the get-go, but it will patina pretty quickly, as far as I understand. So that will be the change there. And this there's some close-ups of the other features that you can see, like the floor indicator that will be restored, and then the call plate that will need to be replaced. As you go into the cab, one of the biggest issues last time, where there were just a lot of unknowns about what could work with ADA compliance, what wouldn't. There was some question as to whether any of the original features could remain within the cabs, which was certainly of concern to us. If you look at the designation ordinance, which is also included in your packet, it calls out many of the features of the elevators, and the cabs themselves are obviously historically important to the building. So the good news is that all of these original brass features can remain in place. And the biggest change, I think, that you'll notice if you're looking at the sidewalls is that they will need to be shortened, but a little bit. I think they're a little bit unsure of how much at this point, but I was told give or take 4 inches, which will be taken out of the center. And then and one of the questions I have for the applicant, I will let them speak to, is how they think that will work with the decorative venting that's around the top of the cabs. So I think that is a little bit of maybe an unknown at this point. So I think if that is the case, that it is somewhat unknown, that we need to make sure that we all of that is verified with staff when it is known. As far as like the dimension and how the venting will be cut and whether there will be a seam here or what that will look like appearance wise. So I've just included, more shots of the interior of the cabs. The other big change, and this was kind of what we suspected would be the case, is that the brass gates unfortunately can't be used and meet ADA compliance. So we are, of course, recommending that, I've noted that as a concern, but at the end of the day, if the commission is comfortable approving an elevator modernization, I think that, it's going to come with some small compromises. And I think that given the amount of other features that they're able to retain and preserve, I think that, we kind of have to give a little. And I would add too, that I did reach out to the SHPO staff, to the Jennifer Cathy, the restoration specialist with their office, to get her courtesy review on the application. And she had the same feedback that I did, that overall, if this were a rehabilitation project, that the changes that are being proposed would be acceptable and meet the Secretary of the Interior standards. So I was pleased to get that feedback from her. So I think one of the things we should probably consider today is, if the gates are removed, where do they go? What do we do with them? Surely we don't want them to get lost in some city facility somewhere and not have some kind of second life. I don't know that I have any great ideas today, but I definitely can ponder it. But if you all have any thoughts on that, surely would be open. I know that the Capital Projects Department has talked about updating some space on the first floor to perhaps have a newer updated museum space of some kind, which might be a good place for the gates. So just a couple of other pictures. The ceiling, this will all be retained, restored, cleaned up. I just included this little detailed drawing of the dimensions. That's the other big thing that you will notice, is that on the wall here, as you're facing the doors, there will be a new control operating panel here. And so the dimensions of that are estimated here, but not known specifically. So I think we would just need to verify that in the field once it is known. But that is how the elevators would be operated. This slide also shows the proposed color palette. I added to it was not until yesterday, but I added in 1988, in conjunction with the restoration school that used to be at AB Tech, there was a restoration report or investigation and report that was done regarding the elevator colors and in the lobby colors. And in that report, they noted that in the walls in particular, I think had over 18 layers of paint. So they examined all of that and all the different features and took samples. And it's a really interesting report. If you want to read through it, it's in the packet. But ultimately, these were the colors that they considered to be most closely matching the original colors of the elevator cab. So this project also includes repainting the cab interiors, as well as installing new marmoleum or linoleum flooring, which it has now, and that was typical of elevators of this era. So and I think at this point that the architect has sent me several different types of linoleum and colors. And so I think it's just kind of up to this group to make the determination on what the appropriate color for the flooring is. So But that is all I have, and I will answer questions if you all have any.
Hey, Alex, can I interject just a couple of clarifications?
Sure.
No, just briefly, and I'll make this quick. The threshold is really two parts. One is the hall threshold, and the second is the car threshold or the cab threshold. The hall one will remain, so they're parallel. So it's really only part of that overall threshold that will be replaced. So that was one. If you'd like, I can give you a brief idea of our idea of the decorative venting and how that will change. So the idea is essentially finding the right point to remove it, so that, and probably doing it symmetrically. So the symmetry still makes sense, but likely just a little off of each end, so the pattern makes good sense. And really, let's see. Oh, the new operating panel. I wanted to say also that the drawing that I have up there is would probably be elaborated similarly to the call stations with a small brass border or something to make it sort of fit in. And the intent on what I actually like about the location is retaining everything that was existing, but then the new door wall, essentially, it's there. So what is new is, houses that. So I think it detracts less from what was there. That's all I wanted to say.
Commissioners, do y'all have any additional questions for Alex at the moment?
Alex, you had said there was a picture of the mail slot. Is that coming out, or why was that in the packet?
I think so. Like the applicant or the city staff shared with me a packet of photos that were taken at some point, and I will let Walter Ear from our Capital Projects Department is here. Walter, I think I was thinking that photo was just in that packet of images, like it's context for original features down there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not any part of consideration in this project.
No, correct.
Okay.
It's not part of the project. No.
Okay, I didn't think so. Thank you.
Is the flooring original now?
No.
The wall color, the rest of the wall color in the first floor and other floors, is that changing to match this?
No, I don't think so.
Not gonna so it's just we're just talking about this.
Yeah, we're just talking about the elevator cabs themselves. And it's not, if you read the report, it's pretty interesting because it describes the original paint color-ish to be like, I don't know, to have some more like intense green themes down there that had some kind of sparkle to it. I don't know. It's interesting to read through that report, but there's no other proposed changes on the first floor as part of this application. It's just the elevator cabs.
Other questions for Alex? Okay. We can, if the applicant's got any kind of additional information, or if commissioners have questions for the applicant, I know you've clarified a few things already, but if there's any questions at the moment for the applicant to clarify from commissioners, and then we'll check in for some public comment and then have a bigger discussion following public comment.
I can ask for the applicant, since these are character defining elements of the building, is it possible that the asbestos inside the doors, if it's left alone, isn't it fine?
I think we also have a gentleman with the elevator company. I don't think it is as simple as just the asbestos aspect. It also relates to some of the other fire ratings.
I'm just asking about the specific, if it was left alone. I think this is an important piece of the building, and the gates, the scissor gates as well. And if you put in the back somewhere the video and kept it being run by operator, you wouldn't have to do any of this, would you?
I guess technically you really wouldn't. It would essentially all be grandfathered in, but I do know that it's my understanding they're plagued with downtime and that sort of thing, which may be a part of it as well.
But the parts are available, right?
I mean, I think you can service it, sure. Yeah, it's my understanding that you can still find someone to service it. I think there was originally Otis equipment.
Sure.
Can I step in on that?
Yes, is that John?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just ask
John,
if anyone
John,
is speaking, can you just, before you begin speaking, you don't have to do it every time, but the first time you speak, just try to say your name and.
Okay. I'm John Tolley with United Elevator Services. To answer your first question, we're still looking at, it's going to depend, but I've done doors where I kept the asbestos doors. It's not a great idea. The way door operators work nowadays, we don't have to drill them. The only problem with asbestos is we drill through them. Matching is going to be a challenge. We think we can handle it either way. As far as the gates go, you only see a gate like that in the movies. That is dangerous for anybody there. Somebody could stick their hand through that in a heartbeat. So the liability that's running on that is really high. As far as the machinery in the machine room, that really needs to change out, because is it still available to a point? We've got a dead elevator because it would be a huge amount to try to repair it. It's almost, I won't say it's impossible, but it would cost more to repair that than a lot of these other costs. But you're at the point where even at some point somebody said this has got to go. This is so unusual to have a manual elevator in a public building. There are a few out there, but they're not in any kind of public buildings. So, yeah. And as far as the gate, again, the gates just is an accident waiting to happen in a lot of ways. It's beautiful and it's cool, and having operators is awesome, but there's a lot of liability going with that.
Right. I think, like Alex, when we were talking about the Drummer building and its windows, cost isn't in our purview, correct?
No, it's not. I mean, we usually talk through this, that we're all human beings, so we all understand that it is very expensive, and being that the city is a municipal body, so we tend to have less funding for some of the more, in this building. I do know I work with Walter all the time on CA requests for all different parts of this building, because it's a lot to maintain. So yes, I think we could consider it just from a human standpoint, that yes, it is a substantial cost to the city and taxpayers to, maintain the existing elevators. But no, cost is not within your purview. You can only base your decisions on the standards. But if you look at the Secretary of the Interior standards, from my perspective, and the SHPO's perspective, they are meeting those standards, and retaining as much original material as possible. And nobody wants to see the gates go, but at the same time, it's just not possible to keep them somehow fixed within the cabs.
I would be interested in hearing a little bit. We haven't talked a lot about what's happening in the machine room, and it's certainly not part of the sort of character defining features of the elevator. But Alex, one of the things that you mentioned in your report that struck me was sort of, there is a uniqueness to this elevator and the way it operates. And certainly those of us that have ridden up the elevator and experienced it, there's an affinity for it, whether it's really safe or not. And so preserving the experience of the elevators, I think in some way, and highlighting that as something that was very unique to the building is interesting and probably appropriate. And I would say to that sort of ties into my question around the sort of guts of the elevator and the machining room and what happens to those components of the elevator that we don't see and that the public doesn't see, and is there an opportunity for them to be able to see it now that it's not going to be in use anymore? And whether or not y'all have given any thought to that, or talk us through maybe what happens in terms of the stuff that's in there.
Sure, it's really not part of the scope, I guess. However, we've had some conversation about retaining anything that is, has aesthetic or historic value, or turning it over to the owner for a potential exhibit space or something to that effect. Some of these components, they're really nice in their own way. They're beautiful industrial, pieces. But I think, and I know the city is also archiving some of this, it's my understanding, with a video and all of that. And we also have some other photographs. But beyond that, we really don't have provision in this scope of work to actually create an exhibit. But we've recommended that happen. One of the big problems up there, honestly, is it's a mercury switch gear, and literally has open little pools of mercury. And it's incredible. It's really cool, but obviously it's toxic. And so whether, that could be cleaned up and turned over, I don't know. But I would almost think the larger piece is just, really photographing them carefully might be your best bet. Of course, like the accordion scissor gate, I would, whether that's an exhibit or potentially some sort of reuse, I think they're incredible, and they should be. They could be a partition wall. And there's a lot of things that could be done with those. Maybe they're a partition wall that partitions off a section of a room that then displays the elevator stuff. I don't know, but I'm kind of rambling. I don't know if I'm answering the question exactly, but I think in some ways the best opportunity would be to photograph, because a lot of it's going to be almost difficult to hang on to unless you had a large room.
I would say that would be staff's suggestion too. I don't think the city, we probably don't have any location that would adequately store all that equipment or have a place for it. But I also would say, just to the commission that I did, just Stacy Merton, who was the historic resources director for many years, I did ask her thoughts on that, just to see what she thought, and she said photographing would be the best way to document as well.
I know in other projects that have landmark designation or National Register designation, there have been some requirements to archive and to store original things that have been replaced on site somewhere. We've done that, for example, at the Smith McDowell House and other places. Where repairing and restoring what was there was not an option, that we've had to do some retaining of those original components on site. Obviously, that's a lot of stuff to retain. But I've been up there, and it's really cool just to be able to see those kinds of spaces, to have that opportunity. But
yeah, I don't disagree. I think it's sort of, I'm not of the mind to say that they're not character defining features like the actual mechanical parts, but they're not visual. No, most members of the public have never seen them. I, in fact, have never been up there to see them. So I mean, I would say that the character defining features that are really most critical, obviously, are the elevator cabs themselves, which are clearly called out in the designation ordinance. So I think that is more critical to me. Not that we shouldn't. I think we absolutely should document the mechanical parts, and I'll let Walter speak to this, but because I was not in the last meeting or two, but I know that our some staff have been working on a documentary for the elevators, and I don't know where that is at this point, but any update, Walter?
Yes, we are working on a video documentary of the elevators. It's going to include photography of the elevator machine room, as well as each floors and the cabs. You know, on the ambitious side of that, we'd like to get character actors to play. Period. But it will be a video photography, video recording of documentation of the elevators.
In addition to that, we have a photographer who's taken the images that are presented in the drawings, but she's an amazing photographer. Initially, we had hoped she would do the machine room as well, but she was completely concerned about entering the machine room. It's not good to do so. In addition to the mercury, there's until it is cleaned up, there's a lot of asbestos. So I'm not sure we can count on her for that to record its original state. But all of these stuff, the cabs, the lobbies and stuff, she's already started taking some really very good photos.
To key off of that, Peter, we are scheduling for the videographer to go up to the machine room between the period where the abatement or the cleanup, asbestos cleanup is done, and before we start doing other work up there to provide a fire enclosure. So they will do photography up there during that period when it's clean.
Okay, great.
Peter, I had maybe one more question, and I think I'm left a little bit still unclear on the on what's happening with the vented sort of screen that's at the top of the elevator cabs.
Right. So basically, as we discussed, the length of it needs to change a little bit to coordinate with the size of the car, and it's a domino effect. It all relates to the door placement, etc. So having said that, my intent would be to shorten it so that it ends up with a symmetrical design. If you take a look at the design, the scroll work essentially would be it would be the same at each end. I mean, that's my gut reaction. It's the best way to do it. If that is done properly, I think it would be very difficult to even tell that it's been done. But the reason is to, again, coordinate with a slight change in the dimension of the cab.
That was the piece I was missing, was the cab is changing sizes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course we're trying to keep. Obviously, we're trying not to do anything we don't have to do, so that it retains it all. But some of these are just the reality of the project, unfortunately. So, but we think we can do that in such a way, like I say, that it is very difficult to even tell. If you look up there the first time, you wouldn't know.
Commissioners, are there other questions for the applicant that we've not yet addressed, or for Alex? And at this point, I'm going to open the floor for public comment if there is any.
Madam Chair, we do not have anybody in the caller queue.
Thank you, Shannon. I will close the floor for public comment, and we can continue the conversation. I'd love to hear from other commissioners feedback that y'all have on this application to give the team an opportunity to get that feedback. So.
Yeah, so I'll go, but I think this is a really challenging vote for sure because, I'd hate to see some of those components go or change, but I also appreciate, giving accessibility to folks that are disabled and providing important life safety, components there. So, I feel a little indifferent, but I don't necessarily know if better solutions that versus what's been proposed.
This is a challenging project, and as a person who loves old things, it's a little hard to see, especially as Chair Kite mentioned, that gate experience thing go, because that was pretty sweet. However, I feel really comfortable, especially knowing that Alex did a courtesy review with SHPO and that their feeling is that it meets Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. There's only so much you can do when you're rehabilitating mechanical equipment of this age. So that's my immediate take.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that it's unfortunate that we're losing these fantastic pieces in, everyday use, but when something like this comes to the forefront, safety has to be number one. And the fact that any piece of these elevators is dangerous to anybody, I think that is a concern. So I think these are good changes.
I do have one more comment about just where some of this stuff is going to go. Ideally, I don't know if we'll really have any control or say so over that aspect of it. And it would, obviously be great to have some kind of documentation of it as well. But, if these items could be something that is on public display, just based on my work in historic commercial buildings, things end up shoved in the basement and then, kind of hauled away over the years. So I'd really hate to see that happen to things. Maybe not so much some of the mechanical equipment, but, for sure, the cages and things like that, or the original, elevator buttons. I'd hate to see that stuff in a box or, put up in someone's private office that in general the public can't really appreciate. So.
Yeah, I'll just offer too, for my part, I'm certainly happy to work with Walter outside of this meeting to have an inventory of the mechanical pieces and just be really clear on kind of what we think is, where those things are going, and just so I understand that too, because that's certainly, it would be worth knowing, and just seeing the photographic documentation and maybe just considering how any of it might be displayed. Obviously, the gates are something that is visible to the public now. We certainly want to retain to present to the public in some format down the road. But if there are any other components that aren't visible, I don't know, Walter, if there's anything up there, if it's all like really massive or what the pieces are that might be something interesting to share. But we can talk about that outside of the meeting if it's helpful.
Commissioners, I want to also maybe just draw your attention to in our packets that we received, the Secretary of the Interior standard for rehabilitation is included in the design in our whatever folder that's called, design standards folder. So there's a really strong list of sort of 10 criteria for rehabilitating, which I think is valuable for us to read as we're considering this. I don't know if we need to read them for everybody. We should be able to pull those up on the drive, Alex, so we don't have to read those. But, in general, I feel like the application is strong in that regard and certainly would reiterate the SHPO's feedback and Alex's feedback. What I most really want to know is how many times you have to push the call button to get the elevator to come to That's my real question in all of this is whether how many times you have to push the button.
One time.
Yeah, just
Push it 5 times though. That certainly is a novel part of the experience, but
yeah.
But not
without a doubt, those little plaques need to be preserved somewhere. Those are great.
Yeah.
When this first came up in August of 2018, there was it was proposed to leave one of. I'm for keeping them all. I think this is unique to Asheville. I think this is unique to the building. I think this is character defining. I think it's a hassle for people who live in the building, and it's charming for everybody in the city. And this is the city building as much as it is. And I know it's a pain for y'all, for city staff. And but the first application that came in that was keeping one of these cabs, even if it's mothballed, instead of throwing away something that we're all going to look back and say, we were happy that we were around when this existed. Even if it's mothballed and shut, the demand on these elevators, I don't think, is that I would like to keep them all, and my fallback is mothballing one of these, a working one, and taking the one that's not working and hasn't worked and has basement access and modifying that. Why other commissioners, since this is closed right now, is that something that other commissioners are there other commissioners who want to keep this this part of this building and not modify it and not take it out to, because this is ADA accessible right now, and it is I don't know about the mercury, that sounds like some bad stuff, but besides that, I don't see 90 years. I haven't heard of any hands lost in this elevator, but I haven't asked either. To other commissioners, is there any appetite for that instead of a wholesale removal of I'll stop talking. You know what I'm saying?
Well, to clarify, are you talking about keeping one of them operational as is?
Exactly.
Okay.
Keeping it operational as is, but it's probably shut and it's only for special occasions, but at least it's there. It's not gone. And around the corner is a good example of, the freight elevator has been modified in this space and just feels weird. The way it looks with the buttons and it's just not right. It just doesn't look, the carpet doesn't match the drapes on that much. And then, so that's where I was.
Correct me if I'm wrong to the team working on this project, but would it even be possible from a mechanical standpoint to keep one elevator? Because that question came up last time, and there wasn't a team of experts such as yourselves in the room to answer that question. So it was one of the unknowns. So can you all speak to that?
I might have to go back to John with United Elevator. I think it opens up some very specific questions about some of the supporting equipment and all of that, you almost have to have two different systems. But can you talk about that, John?
Yeah, I understand. These elevators were put in, I think, in 26. Or maybe actually installed. When this building was built, the elevators were craned in there probably with mule teams before that tile roof was put on. Okay, because that's how they did it back then. So this is the most original, other than paint, elevator just about I've seen and or rarely ever see still operational. By now, an elevator like this would have been modernized probably 3 and getting ready to start its 4th time, because you generally modernize an elevator every 25 to 30 years. We're keeping them running, but it's very difficult because they're very stupid. And yeah, it's cool to have somebody in there driving you and running it. And I've had my opportunity because I wanted to play with it. And when I was 13 years old, I worked in a place, and that's what I did. I ran the elevator part-time, and it was great. But they don't hit the floor, and you got to look at what your public is. And again, yeah, nobody's gotten hurt yet, but it doesn't die. It can happen, and it does happen. And you've got that liability. You got the liability of not being at floor level. Your mechanics up there, each one of those machines weighs right at 2.5 tons. For us to get them out of there is going to be challenging. The newer machinery is similar, but it's much smaller and can be taken apart. For me to get any of that out, it's going to come out in pieces. There's some flyball governors, which is what everybody thinks is cool, that come out, and they've got the balls on them. They spin when the elevator moves. That's something to keep that's kind of cool. The gates are cool. The gates just lift off, and you can take them anywhere you want to. But mechanically, to keep that one running and try to keep it running is not practical. Sooner or later, these machines are going to die. They just are. They're almost 100 years old. And to repair them, to replace them,
there's companies that repair elevators, old elevators.
I know that, but I repair elevators. This is what I do for a living. Understand?
Right.
But they still are going to die. They don't last forever, and you repair them. I've got, and there's some that can't ever be done. Believe me, I work with TVA, and they put stuff in that you can't take the elevator machine out of the dam. But is it practical in the long run? How long is it going to be down when it does that? You know, in doing this, we're able to schedule your downtime. Whereas nobody's wanted to spend the money. The elevator that's dead right now has been down quite a while. And any way you look at it, when it goes down, you're looking at an elevator that's going to be down for 16 plus weeks and maybe longer. During the COVID time, that time has gone out quite a bit. Is it possible? As far as keeping the look and the drive, yeah, we can probably do that, but you still need to upgrade the machinery in there on a very simple basis, because this stuff, yeah, I can buy parts, but every part I buy for that is a used part. They aren't making these. They hadn't made these parts in years.
Can you leave one elevator that's working now, I think was the question, and update with what you're saying the other two?
That would go to the authority having jurisdiction beyond me. I mean, is it physically possible? Yeah, for a while.
That's all I need.
Physically possible? Yeah, for now.
I get that. But you're saying new elevators have a lifespan of, is that new elevator mechanics, what pulls it up and down? That's what has a 20-year lifespan, or the cab?
Well, no, the machine will probably have another lifespan of 50 years. Quite honestly, the stuff that's in there's last 100 years, that's great. You don't build stuff nobody builds anything like that anymore. But they're also old, and they're wearing down, and you can't even, like I said, I know people can come in here and do it, but for how long they're going to be able to do that? Keeping it running, and especially on a temporary basis, is it feasible? Yeah. The control part of it, you want to hit floors. You really do want to hit the floor without somebody having to step down or step up in the elevator. And they can, it's challenging to explain, but you wouldn't drive, I doubt any of you are driving a 96-year-old vehicle every day. So I love this elevator. Believe me, I'm an elevator guy through and through. I love going to this job, and I'm with y'all. I love riding this elevator, and unlike y'all, I love it more because I've gotten to drive. So I'm with you on that side of it.
Will, are you proposing that maybe one of the elevators is more of a showpiece that's just non-operational, where it's left sort of in its original condition?
Yes, that it's not daily operational, but it is ceremoniously, if that's a word, operational. Just like the subways in New York that they find that were mothballed and I think below City Hall there, where they came back and it's there and then they redid it. And leave it the way it is. It's the original. One of these is the original. All three aren't going up and down. You have but all day, every day. But instead of putting it in a museum, this is a place where it works. Or for a while, John. But for now, it's working. But yes, that's what I was saying.
Will, this is Sean Bowman with Weaver Cook. One challenge we're faced with leaving an elevator is that we're going to rebuild the machine room and bring that machine room up to code, and leaving the old equipment would not pass current day code. Is it possible to leave one car as a relic and occasionally use it with an operator? I think so, but I think that the design team would have to apply to the State Department of Labor the elevator bureau to even see if they would grant an exception. So that's one thing to consider. I'm not sure that the state would even approve that, but we could certainly investigate it.
When it was brought
Another
up,
issue, because I'm trying to be practical to what you said, is okay. Emily, I believe, mentioned the push buttons in there. You've only got one set of push buttons. Now, I can't attach that. That would strictly be for somebody running somebody up and down. You can't tie that controller into the other one, and I can't tie a modern controller into a car switch where somebody's turning the crank. I can't do that either. So now you're going to end up with two solid sets of push buttons in every floor. That's the only possible way of doing it. So there are some sacrifices that would come with that.
Sean, if you don't touch one of them, you don't have to bring it up to code, is what I understood from the last time this was brought up. You only have to bring it up to code, sort of. And tell me if I'm wrong on that. But my mothball plan, which isn't. I know that's sort of like a compromise. It's a compromise, is what it is. But is that? I'm not. Is it something? Just a yes or no? Is that something that's possible for you to go ahead and modernize the mechanics up in the attic for the other two? I guess that's for John.
Yeah, I think generally when it comes to, so for instance, if we weren't to touch the stairwell during the renovation, we wouldn't have to bring the handrails up to code. I think, and I'll let John speak more to this, but because the three elevators share a hoistway and share a machine room, that might be a difference here, but I'll let John speak to that.
Thank you so much. Here's the thing. When y'all first came out with this 2018, you also didn't have 2019 code, which the state of North Carolina has adopted. And they're going to be kind of lenient with y'all in what we're doing with this, because I spoke to them. They're like, yeah, we want to get as much done. There are some things I have to put in here to make 2019 code. These are not truly ADA elevators. They just aren't. You don't have a wheelchair turning radius. We cannot get that. So we're going to do every other possible feature that we can. Here's the thing. Right now, the building's fairly empty, okay, from what I understand and what I've seen since I've been in that building for the last few years. What if the building gets busy? that building was designed to have 3 elevators that size. So now maybe one thing I'll promise you, no matter what, these elevators are going to break at some point. For some reason, they're going to be down for a little bit. Now you're down to 1, and it's not COVID season. You need 2 elevators. Obviously we're good with however you want to have, but there's a lot of challenge to it. A lot of it are just the practical application of having enough elevators to move people in and out of the building when court's in session, or when all the business of the city is going on. And those elevators, especially right now, think about COVID right now, where only maybe 2 people should even be in that elevator. That's a lot of people trying to move in that building. And then you've got a person in a wheelchair and 2 other people and the practical aspect of it is not very good. I know what you're saying, and I really appreciate it, but it's as far as elevator working, it's not a good idea.
I don't think the building's practical. If it was a practical building, you'd move into a Toys R Us on the edge of town, and that would be a good place for all the city to meet. But it's an oddball building that's too small for city council. It's too small for the elevator. It's too small for Alex to have a conversation without overlapping conversations getting in her office. So it's a tough building. But I don't know. I'd like Emma, Chair Kite. What is your thoughts, or other commission?
I think on the surface, Will, the concept is great. I think that it comes with a lot of impracticality to it that makes it, I think, would present a hardship, I think, in the long run for the city, which I think is a concern. I love the opportunity to preserve the experience of the elevator, and I think that's one thing that is part of the character defining thing of it. But I don't see a practical pathway to that, and without, I think, putting burden and hardship on the city in the long run. And I think that there's a balance there. I think that the Secretary of Interior Standards acknowledges the balance between preserving what's there and the need to rehabilitate in a way that does have good balance in terms of when you restore and when you replace and how much you preserve, and an acknowledgement that modernization is necessary. And so for me, I think I get excited with an opportunity to preserve it and to keep it operational the way that it is. But I think it gets stuck in a little bit of balance of that practicality piece that I think we have to be sensitive to. So that's where I get stuck.
I think it might be helpful to hear from some of the other commissioners that maybe haven't offered their thoughts on this, since this is such a big, important project. If you don't mind chiming in just with any, I know a couple of you have offered your thoughts, but anybody else? Bill, you're muted.
No, I'm unmuted. Yeah, just to go on record, I completely agree with Chair Kite's observations.
I agree with Chair Kite too, and I look ahead politically. You go to the council and say, we want to maintain 2 elevator systems in essence, and we want you to pay for it. What would their reaction be, and what could they do? Can they come back? Because they could legitimately say, our own standards say we can meet these. This is what can be done, and we've decided that for justifiable and understandable, and I respect your viewpoint, nostalgia of the experience, but to say, by the way, with all of the other challenges you have in the city and services and needs, that we're going to make you do this at the expense of this, is also a little unfair, I think, to Chair Kite's viewpoint. So I agree. I would love to keep the experience, but we have to be practical as well. And it does, what they have presented does meet the standards and guidelines which we are supposed to judge this by.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Chair Kite and the other opinions on this. I think that it's such a wonderful idea to consider like the experience of seeing that elevator in that space where it was used for sure. But I think the value of trying to keep that running for any length kind of doesn't make any sense when we know that it's going to break down and then eventually just become like a standstill monument when it could have been that in another space if we moved it anyway at this point. So I think logically it doesn't really flow as much as it maybe would for me to want to agree to that.
Would it be a good time to make a motion?
Bill, before that, I have one question for Alex, and it may tie to a potential motion on some level. I think that there's a general consensus from the commission about around the idea of documenting the elevators the way that they are. Including machine room components and things like that. And I acknowledge that that's maybe outside of the scope of the design team and the construction team that's presenting and looking obviously to move forward with the modernization project. But I wonder what sort of our next steps might be, Alex, in sort of reinforcing the consensus, I think, of this commission that there be obviously concerted effort. I know there is some already in terms of documenting, and I think the documentation is important, but how do we still provide access maybe to the public to experience it on some virtual level and to be connected to the history around the elevators? And so I know that there's not a plan yet, but I would hope that, an eventual motion from this commission and the project proceeding forward isn't an indication that this commission doesn't think that that's important or that doesn't need to really follow through with what I think everyone's intention already is, but that I would hate for it to get lost in the mix because it wasn't somehow clear or documented. So I don't know what the path forward is for that in terms of whether it's appropriate for that to be a condition or if that's something else that we just look to the city to follow through on their end, or just what our options are there.
Well, so it's already in the works.
That they work with staff on that because this is going to be an ongoing project.
I think that you could make it a condition that the features are documented. I mean, in some cases they already have, like we have the photographs that have already been taken. And then our communications staff has been working with Capital Projects on the documentary video thing that will include the machinery as well as the features that are visible to the public. So I mean, I guess I can just reassure you that is happening. Work has already started and started several months ago. So I can just make a point to when that information or, when that final product is available to share it with all of you. And I'm sure it will be posted on our website and probably some other places as well as we think about, how we want to make that information available to the public so that it, it is easily accessible, that it is, we're honoring the history of our building and making sure that, people can experience that for future generations for sure. And that was the idea of doing the documentary was for that purpose, since they are so unique and the experience is unique. So So if you all are comfortable with that, just my reassurance that that is happening behind the scenes now, you can certainly put a condition on the CA of some kind, but I don't think, I'm not sure how we would word that, but you could just say that city staff continues to form a complete documentary or documentation of the elevators and their mechanical features, if that makes sense.
To memorialize the feature for the public benefit, something like that.
That sounds perfect, Gail. Thank you.
Yeah, I love the idea of the documentation. I'm also concerned with physical parts of the elevator. I mean, who do you think is really the decision maker when it comes to where that stuff goes?
It's a good question. I think that it would be really a discussion between Walter and myself. Walter is a project manager, director. I can't remember. I'm sorry, Walter, I botched your title, but he and I can, outside of this meeting, try to make a game plan for where the features live. And we can certainly, if we have an idea for reusing the gates or displaying any of the other materials, we can bring those ideas to you all for your recommendation. Like if we decided to do a display of some kind or whatever, we can certainly bring that information to you. And then, I'm assuming that for now, the gates would be stored somewhere in our building when the demolition begins. And then I'm not sure about the mechanical parts. I'm sure it just depends on whether it's anything we can keep from a safety perspective, or whether we can, physically keep it due to space issues or whatever. So I can certainly talk offline with Walter about that and try to figure out what's going to work best. Because I don't know that we know what we're going to, the gates may just have to live in storage temporarily until we figure out, a place where they can be, displayed or put out somewhere where the public can enjoy them. Certainly the last thing that I want is for them to sit in a dark closet somewhere too. So I certainly share that thought that they should be in a place where the public can experience them. And I'm just not sure we know that what that will look like yet. So
if I can plug in on that, as far as doing a history of it, we would be more than happy to help with that by saying this component does this. This is how this component was made. This is how this component worked. Get inside the hoistway and show what it looks like on top of the car and what everything's doing. We'll be happy to work with y'all to make that. Again, I love elevators. This is cool. We'll be happy to have people explain the inner workings to them, and people can find that interesting. The elevators are fascinating. So we're all on board to help you with that.
John, I also liked the point that you had about how, in your knowledge and experience, that they got those machinery inside that shaft to begin with. That's kind of cool too.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because understand that these elevators, I'm feeding the thing for wanting to keep them. That elevator idea goes back to 1880, goes through into the 1940s, mainly with freight elevators, but same idea carried through for the first 100 years of elevators. There was a lot of that basic idea going on. But then they just get outmoded and they get outdated.
This is Janice Ashley. I was just going to mention that if you are thinking of the condition, I think you've decided to definitely add that condition. And it's a good idea because just remember, the city's an applicant just like any other applicant. If any other applicant came forward, you'd be sure to be putting a condition to say, this is what you want. And it helps the city staff. Maybe it's not that specific, but at least the idea of it got the certificate of appropriateness with the condition that we'd make every effort to retain these historic pieces and keep them in a place that's publicly accessible as much as practicable or something like that. Because that again, it helps city staff to make the case that we're going to have to find a way to meet that condition. And I think that that's helpful.
Okay, it's time for a motion.
Sort of sounds like it.
Madam Chair, based upon the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit
Wait,
A.
I'm sorry. Did we open for public comment, Emily?
We did.
I'm sorry.
And there wasn't any.
Okay.
No, there wasn't. Including Exhibit A, project description, 2 pages. Exhibit B, photographs and plans, 11 pages. Exhibit C, local historic landmark designation, ordinance number 1709 and designation report, 8 pages, added by staff, January 4, 2021. Exhibit D, elevator photographs, 22 pages, added by staff, January 4, 2021. Exhibit E, additional call plate and COP panel images, 4 pages, received January 7, 2021. Exhibit F, 1988 Biltmore Campbell Smith Inc. report on original paint treatment for the elevators and lobby area, 16 pages, received January 12, 2021. Exhibit G, image of proposed brass cab threshold, received January 12, 2021. Exhibit H, panel renderings, received January 12, 2021. Exhibit I, color palette rendering, received January 12, 2021. Exhibit L, manufacturer specification for replacement flooring, received January 12, 2021. Alex, did you say there were some images that came in that aren't on this list? Is there an M?
There's nothing that's on this list, but I do think we need to make a condition on the CA that the color for the flooring will be, I guess, determined in the field with the applicant.
I would draw your attention, Bill, when the time comes to those couple of 3 items, I think, Alex, that you have asked for to provide, and maybe some of them have already been provided.
Yeah, I can help flesh those out, Bill, when we get to the conditions.
Yeah, and we need that wonderful language that Gail had as well. Okay, we'll go on. And the commission's actual inspection and review of subject property by all members except, I guess most of us haven't been there with COVID, but we've all been in City Hall, so I think we can say we've all been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I move that this commission approve the certificate of appropriateness based on the following. 1, that the application is to modernize 3 original manually operated elevators. 1, replace original brass doors on first floor with new brass doors, replace steel doors on all other floors with new metal doors to match original. 2, clean and restore all original door surrounds. 3, remove original 2 7/8 inches by 7 5/8 inches brass and mother of pearl call panels from all floors and replace with new 2 7/8 inch by 7 5/8 inch plates cast from the original with white illuminated buttons. 4, restore original door indicators. 5, replace existing brass cab thresholds with new bronze thresholds to accommodate new doors. 6,
Sorry,
clean
that's
and-
supposed to say brass, new brass thresholds, just to correct that.
Okay, replace new existing brass threshold cab thresholds with new bronze cab thresholds, new brass threshold to accommodate. So we're replacing bronze with brass. Thresholds to accommodate new doors. 6, clean and restore all original brass cab panels, including multi-capacity plate, floor plate, capacity plate, cab switch, and call station. 7, rebuild ceiling light and fan and clean. 8, clean and repaint ceiling, walls, and trim. 9, clean and restore original venting. 10, reduce width of sidewalls by 4 inches. What's this? Okay, 11, replace existing flooring with new marmoleum flooring in walnut color. 12, remove original brass accordion scissor gates. Gates will be retained and preserved on site. 13, install new plus or minus 11 5/8 inch by 53 3/8 inch brass control panel adjacent to doors on interior of cabs. 14, install new 2 7/8 inch by 7 5/8 inch brass firefighter recall plates on exterior wall of first floor, matching material, dimension, design, and placement height as call plates. 17, elevator cabs will be repainted consistent with the colors listed as matching original on page 8 of the 1988 paint restoration report completed by Biltmore Campbell Smith Restorations, Inc. All work will be in accordance with attached drawings and plans. All permits, variances, or approvals as required by law must be obtained before work may commence.
Before we get to a second, I've got one clarification. We're referencing a specific floor color. Has that decision been made, or do we need to leave that open for staff review?
Yeah, I think
Would be a condition, right?
Yeah, sorry, I just forgot to eliminate that after I got the additional sample colors. So
Okay, so let's deem that eliminated.
Can I make one other clarification?
Please.
Not to muddy the water. The 4-inch dimension of the cab size change, we think it's around 4 inches. It may be a little slightly more, it may be slightly less. The objective on our end is to reduce it as little as possible, but there are still some variables about that until we have the actual shop.
right, we're going to put a condition on the CA that reflects that you'll verify that measurement with staff.
Okay, good.
Before proceeding with the work.
Okay, so could we change that anyway? Just reduce the width of sidewalls by plus or minus 4 inches to be determined. 2, Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, specifically the standards for spaces, features, and finishes, mechanical systems, accessibility, and health and safety were used to evaluate this request. 3, this application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. A, features and finishes that are important in defining the overall historic character of the building are being retained and preserved. B, original call plates and gates are required to be removed or replaced in accordance with NC Building Code. C, new call plates will match original call plates as closely as possible in terms of materials, finish, dimension, design, and location. D, original brass gates will be retained and preserved on site. E, visible features of the building's mechanical systems that are important in defining the historic character of the building are being retained and preserved. F, original brass doors, right?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
contain asbestos and are required to be replaced for health and life safety purposes. G, replacement of original call panels, new fireman call panels, and new COP are required to be replaced, installed to meet ADA and life safety requirements. New and replacement features will match the original as closely as possible or will be compatible with the existing original features. 4, that the action and improvements proposed in the application before us for a certificate of appropriateness are congruous with the special historic character of the local historic landmark.
Do we have a second?
Do we need to add the condition?
That
That's
comes
the second leg of things. That's after we approve the main
Oh,
motion.
sorry. Excuse me. Then I second it.
Okay, we'll vote on this motion by roll call. Vice Chair Eakins?
Aye.
Commissioner Mercedes?
Aye.
Commissioner Gardner?
Aye.
Commissioner Hornaday,
No.
Commissioner Lazarus,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Aye.
myself, aye, and that motion carries.
Okay, based upon the foregoing findings and for the reasons set forth therein, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be issued with the following conditions. Okay, please help.
Okay, so I guess the condition about the
Documentation.
documentation and Gail said it
And
really
other-
well.
I wrote down, I think, what I wrote down, so edit me as I come out, but that the city staff will ensure that this elevator and related system be documented and memorialized. I don't know if you want to say memorialize the elevator experience, like to have some idea of the action or not, but nevertheless memorialized for public benefit.
Excellent. Okay. And then we have a condition as to color.
That staff will confirm flooring color with the applicant.
Okay, is there anything else? There was in the 4-inch measurement of the cab width, right?
Right, the dimensions of the cab of the sidewall widths and the dimensions of the COP will be verified by the applicant and approved by staff.
Any other conditions? Okay. Anybody seconding?
I'll second it, Lazarus.
Okay, we'll vote again by roll call. Vice Chair Eakins,
Aye.
Commissioner Mercedes,
Aye.
Commissioner Gardner,
Aye.
Commissioner Hornaday,
No.
Commissioner Lazarus,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Aye.
myself, aye. That motion also carries.
Thanks, everyone. I guess probably the easiest thing for me to do, I'll follow up with Peter and Sean and Walter just on next steps as far as this approval. Does that make sense? All right, I'll touch base with y'all in the next couple of days.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your time, folks.
And then Chair Kite, I think we've got a couple of other business items. If you're ready, I can move on to those. Okay. So just really quickly, because I know it's been a long meeting. The Sonley Award discussion, I would just ask that you all be prepared to pass some kind of resolution on that at the next meeting. Just bring your ideas on if you have thoughts on potential names for, if you are in support of renaming it, if you have any ideas on names, as well as consideration of whether or not you want us to reuse the existing, keep giving the existing silver cup that we have used since the inception of the award, or if you want to consider a different type of award format. Certainly open to your thoughts and ideas on that as well. And also, I think we talked about how we might provide some context when giving the award, as to kind of like how the name was, came about in the first place, and then the evolution of the name change. So just some things to consider. And I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up that just to expect that we'll try to get that taken care of at the next meeting, because pretty soon after that, it will be time to think about the potential nominees for 2021. So right around the corner. So, and then I know, Will, you had thought, mentioned maybe consideration of maybe like somehow like some concession to Andrea Clark, kind of, inviting her maybe to, when we do finally make that decision, to kind of help show some appreciation that her, her life experience was part of how we was part of the process for us kind of initiating the discussion on changing the name of the award. So does that help? I know we can anticipate having a pretty hefty agenda in February, so it'll probably be a lot to get through. So so if you guys want to pass along ideas to me before the meeting, feel free, and then I can kind of try to organize it all in a place for everyone to look at and be considering ahead of time. If you all want to do it that way, we can certainly do it that way, just so we can try to make it, take the least amount of time possible for all of you during the meeting. But I realize it may warrant, quite a bit of further discussion. So does that sound good on that? Any thoughts, questions?
No, excellent. We got our assignment.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Wait, I have one more. There's one more other business item real quick. Burton Street Neighborhood Architectural Survey. This is something that just sort of like started to happen really quickly right before the holidays. At least for me, not for other city staff who've been kind of in conversations with Burton Street for some time. They have been interested in doing what we would call a pattern book, which is sort of like a publication that it's sort of like a design guidelines, but kind of like a little bit lighter. It's not as detailed as a set of design standards. So really to initiate the pattern book, we really need to finish architectural survey of that neighborhood. There has been some survey there as part of I-26. But if you look at GIS, you can see that it's mostly stuff that's like right along 240 that has been surveyed, and not the stuff that's farther west going into that neighborhood. So we really need to finish that. So we have, I will be managing the project, and Stacy will be working on it with me. We're about to draft the RFP, and it will be interesting to see what we end up with there, because the last time around when we were initiating our first African American Heritage Resource Survey back in 2018, we had tried to get some more diversity from our applicant pool. Didn't come up with anything great there, so I'm more hopeful this time around. But I'll keep you all abreast of that as we move along. So, and that is being funded in part by the Burton Street Neighborhood Association and in part by our departmental budget. So,
Do you think there's any chance this could lead to a historic district being made?
It would be interesting to see that. I'm not sure that that's what they're after. I know that they really want the pattern book to kind of be partly a storytelling tool, and I think we'll probably do that in-house once we get the survey completed. We're planning to use, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Esri Story Map software. We have if you go on our website, we have a local landmark one that I created 4 or 5 years ago, and so it seems pretty dated now, but they story maps for all different kinds of topics and information sharing. But it's a great tool because you can it's really interesting from a visual standpoint. So I think that's what we'll do for their pattern book. I think that and this will be interesting. This is a topic that I'm personally very interested to see where the evolution of historic preservation as a field goes as we try to find ways to preserve more resources for underrepresented communities that have often been, obviously highly impacted by urban renewal projects and insensitive infill. And, the properties may not have what the integrity that is needed for a district in the eyes of the state and federal offices that we work with. But I kind of have a gut feeling that that is evolving. It may be slow, but I think we'll see more support from the SHPO in particular about, having some kind of built-in understanding that that is part of their historic context, that they were impacted by urban renewal, and that may have resulted in a significant loss of resources for those neighborhoods, and that is part of their story, right? So,
add to that, the impact of highway construction and widening.
Right. It's just a continual threat to those neighborhoods, unfortunately. Although we did see some interesting funding kind of come online. I kind of skimmed it because I've been really busy getting ready for this meeting, but there was some email circulated internally that was related to some funding. I think that might be introduced for kind of like reverse urban renewal in a way, like taking like kind of what's been considered for the Bowen Bridge already, like turning it into more of a boulevard, but even like all of 240, like that's right there, like trying to reconnect the neighborhoods that were cut apart, where it would be like a kind of big pot of transportation department funding, not from our transportation department necessarily, but the federal transportation department. So that should be interesting. I mean, that obviously won't fix the damage that's been done, of course, but it's, interesting to see that there are a lot of positive projects or, funding sources coming online around kind of realigning those areas with kind of valuing what the community has faced in terms of their loss, and then kind of helping them try to have some voice in rebuilding. So that should be interesting. But Burton Street, it's been a while since I looked at the environmental impact survey, so I know that they will obviously be impacted. They'll lose probably some resources right along that side of 240. So it's a bummer. And I mean, that neighborhood has a really neat history. It was part of E.W. Pearson was a very early land developer, like the only African-American land developer that I'm aware of. And that was the neighborhood that he developed. So it does have a lot of historical significance. So it'll be interesting to see what we learn from this project. So we're expecting that's on our work plan for the rest of 2021. And then we'll start working on the pattern book next winter. So I will keep you guys posted when we get once we release the RFP and have more information to share with you.
That sounds wonderful.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was all my information to share. They may have anything else, updates, info they want to talk about.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
You too.
We'll see y'all next month.
Yeah, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.